Do the trashy pulp novels of the world have anything to offer? Are bestsellers all they're cracked up to be? Here at Terrible Book Club, we explore whether you really can judge a book by its cover, or its ridiculous synopsis. You ever passed a book and thought, ugh, who's reading this? We probably are. Hello and welcome to episode 204 of the Terrible Book Club. I'm Chris and this is Paris.
Hello.
This time we read The Way of the Shadow Wolves, The Deep State and the Hijacking of America by Steven Seagal and Tom Morrissey, a book that now has a foreword by none other than Joe Arpaio, proof that we are in the most pitch black of timelines streaming through the cosmos.
Yep.
Published in 2017, listeners, friends, and strangers who we have just met have asked us to read and review this ever since, including me. I've been lobbying for this book for quite a while, I think.
Yeah, and it's funny because, it's not like it's not like I had an objection to doing it. I just knew that there were already a lot of extant, reviews or discussions of it, and it was just one of those things where I was like, well, what are we going to have to say that's new? But now I just feel like this is a rite of passage. Like, we must go through the way of the Shadow Wolves to come out the other side as book reviewers. It has to happen.
Also, our patron Miles May was the hero we all need and deserve by paying us and asking to read this.
Yeah, Miles put a 6 hour to our head, and specifically
He shadow wolfed us.
He did.
Came out of the dark. Anyway, Miles said, all right, then. This time my request is for a book I'm guessing you'll find much worse. The Way of the Shadow Wolves by Steven Seagal and Tom Morrissey. Basically, this story seems like it's a mix of straight-to-DVD Steven Seagal movie and right-wing conspiracy. I should also note that despite having two authors, Seagal is the focal point of the cover. To top it off, Joe Arpaio did the foreword, so I imagine this will be a train wreck. If you're able to squeeze this in, I would love for you to talk about this. Well, squeeze it in we did. We blended into the shadows like ninjas and put it into the schedule.
Actual phrase from the text. All of these things we're saying are from the text, just in case there's confusion.
Okay.
Chris, though, it's Steven Seagal, though. It's Steven Seagal.
What?
No, it's Seagal.
No, it's not.
No, it's
what
Seagal.
are you talking about?
Okay, so
Who said so?
We didn't have a ton of time to prep for this episode. I'm actually sick today as well. So the apologies for the lack of citation in the present moment. However, we record months and months in advance. So hopefully by the time this comes out, I will have some links in the notes to prove this. But I heard and read in multiple places that Steven Seagal's last name is actually Steven Seagal, but he at some point randomly went to an art exhibit by the artist Chagall and was like, I want it to be Seagal now. And hence, ever since, he's no longer Steven Seagal. So, I get it, because Steven Seagal sounds hilarious and silly, and, of course, you want to be big, serious, tall lawman, Steven Seagal, because it sounds a little different. So, I don't know if this is true. This, as of right now, this is hearsay, but if I find it to be true, I will include it in the notes of this episode. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for that clarification. I'm sure we'll have pronunciation wars further on in this episode.
Every time. It's our signature.
Every time.
Here on Terrible Book Club.
If this is your first time listening to this show, what we do here at the Terrible Book Club is
have
read
pronunciation
books that we
wars.
assume will be bad. We have that. And we also read books that we assume will be bad based on their cover, title, summary, or some combination of the three. Sometimes, like today, we read books that our patrons, listeners, or friends recommend. So we do the opposite of what most people do in a bookstore or while they're browsing the internet. Usually this experiment results in a disappointing read, but once in a while we end up liking the book. In addition to our usual barnyard language, today's episode includes discussion or mention of right-wing talking points like open borders immigration, drug cartel violence, law enforcement worship, and some magical native vibes.
Oh, yeah.
And generally just some violence. You know, there's a lot of action movie shit happening here.
Yeah. Oh, there is also a lot of anti-Muslim, anti-Arab sentiment.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty heavy. So So if you don't want to hear anything about that, if current reality is maybe too much for you, this might be one to skip.
All right. I'm going to read the back of the book summary, and then Paris, you can give us our characters and setting and the summary that I wrote up.
Which I have not looked at, and I am very excited to read without
I can't
any
promise
concept.
you it's totally coherent, because I can't promise you that the story was entirely totally coherent. So I did my best on that.
Oh, no, I am excited. And before you begin reading the printed back of the book summary thing, this is what's on Amazon right now. There's also the actual physical back of the book appears to just be bios of Seagal and Morrissey, and then some other law enforcement guy saying, yeah, this book's good. So the actual back of the physical book doesn't have anything about the story.
You're supposed to buy it based on Seagal being on the cover.
Well, it's just because that goes to, I mean, it's a harbinger of what's to come, let's say. This is all about egos and the stroking of same. Anyway, Chris, what I did want to say instead of that was that any typos or repetitions in this Amazon summary are as written. These are not errors through transcription. This was copy-pasted as is.
All right. So here's the back of the book summary. This is the story of an Arizona tribal police officer who stumbles onto one of the biggest cases in the history of the Southwest. He is a member of an elite group within the Native American communities known as the Shadow Wolves. What comes with his discovery is the uncovering of massive corruption in places where he once had placed his total trust. Shadow Wolves is a book of fiction based on reality. Both authors have worked with, confronted, and seen the power of the deep state and the manner in which many federal government agencies willfully violate the Constitution and the laws of the land in service to special interests. The 2016 election has for the first time made many American citizens aware that the deep state is very real, that the mainstream media is a fake news media offering a false narrative designed by the secret intelligence world in service to special interests. The fight for America's soul is taking place far from Washington, D.C. This is a story of one small group of patriots fighting the good fight.
Thank you, Chris.
So that doesn't tell you fucking anything about what's going on in the... It kind of does a little bit, but not really the plot.
Yeah, it just guarantees that you're getting just conspiracy straight to the veins, just directly injected.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Big time.
So our setting is roughly Arizona, kind of near, I forget, are we near Phoenix, Arizona?
Yeah, they mentioned Phoenix and Maricopa County Jail, so the more populous parts of Arizona, and also near the border. Is Phoenix actually near the border?
You know, I'm going to say I don't know much about the topography or geography of Arizona, but I know Maricopa is not far, and the Tohono O'odham Reservation is literally on the border, which is also where some of this takes place. So, yeah, that all tracks. That's all near enough. You know, in the Southwest, time is measured differently than here. You know, here 4 hours away is far, there 4 hours away is close, that kind of a deal. So we are generally there. We're in Tohono O'odham Nation, and then we're in the area around that. So, you know, Maricopa and like other various sort of deserty areas. I guess they don't mention Tucson, but Tucson's kind of close to there. That's where we are. All right. Our main characters here, we've got John Nantan Gode, or Godet. Honestly, not totally sure how to pronounce that. In the text, it mentions Godet, but I can't tell if that's the officer making fun of him. But anyway, the main character's name is John Good, essentially. Let's just get that in there. Oh, the creativity is just bursting at the seams. Otherwise, we've got other shadow wolves like Noche, Chico, Alicia, who is John's girlfriend. We've also got other various cops from different agencies like the DEA, the FBI, yada yada. You got some local people. They all don't matter. We've got Sweet Tooth and his brother Jimmy, two young indigenous teenagers, I think, who are getting mixed up in cartel stuff. Mexican cartel smugglers, imported Arab jihadists. They are just a huge, one-note group of people in this. We've got Barack Obama. I mean, the evil president, who is not Barack Obama, but definitely is. And
they
then,
never say Barack Obama, but it's very clearly Barack Obama.
Yeah, and we'll talk about why that is shortly. And then, of course, how can we forget the woman reporter, because she can't just be a reporter, the hot lady who left her photo and was the obvious corpse at the beginning of the story. Shout out to you, Maria. Yeah. Great.
She's the SVU corpse at the beginning of the story.
Yes.
That sets the whole thing off.
She is. All right, so I am about to read Chris's feverish summary of the general plot points, kind of what happens in this story, so that you do not have to read The Way of the Shadow Wolves. I haven't looked at this yet, so I'm not sure what I'm going to encounter. In any case, hopefully this will give you some guideposts as we discuss what we liked and didn't like about the book afterwards. So, all right. I gotta go to the stone place. Stone face.
Void mind.
I gotta go to the void mind. John Nantan Godet is a tall Native American cop that has cool psychic powers, which boils down to him having a gut feeling and always being correct. That's because he's a ghost warrior, known as a shadow wolf, that can blend into the darkness. How? He just can! One day, John picks up a young man known as Sweet Tooth from the Arizona desert. Sweet Tooth was suspiciously camping and, when questioned, reveals he was looking for his brother Jimmy. Sweet Tooth didn't find Jimmy, but he did see a bunch of SUVs driving through the desert and stopping near his campsite to do some sort of exchange. John searches the area and finds a body. His gut tells him this must have something to do with the Mexican cartel activity, or perhaps even the Mexican military doing practice maneuvers on the U.S. side of the border, since Sweet Tooth claims he heard Spanish as well as another language he couldn't place. That's enough for John to round up a task force of other cops to stake out the desert. They roll up super inconspicuously in huge SUVs full of weapons and gear, and manage to spot a border patrol vehicle and unmarked van following it. John and crew tail the van, which gets spooked and starts to run. This eventually leads to a hostage situation where the men in the van hop out and enter a home, but John and co are so cool that they burst in and headshot the hostage takers, while also taking 3 men into custody. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., some Fed lays out the entire evil plan to smuggle terrorists into the U.S. over the Mexican border, supported by the deep state, which is so deeply entrenched in the U.S. government that even the president is in on it. Back at the police station, John and co are interrogating the 3 captured men with the old, "Your buddy already squealed, so start talking if you want to avoid jail" routine. The one who does talk reveals that the Mexican cartels they work for are collaborating with extremist Muslims in some fashion by talking about the beheading parties occurring in the desert. At the same time, Federal Special Agent Wilson busts in, demanding to take custody of the 3 men, but backs off after John refuses and a phone call to a superior who's cool with them staying in non-Fed custody. They are taken to Maricopa County Jail, but not before John can peel off with the talky one and ask him more questions about cartel involvement with jihadists and picking up his also Shadow Wolf girlfriend, Alicia. On the way to Maricopa, they are attacked by men in an SUV who manage to kill the talky cartel member before John and Alicia 360 no-scope all of them. But that's okay, because John's also Shadow Wolf undercover DEA agent Sunday calls him up to say, "Let's go check out the hotel room of this reporter lady I was supposed to talk to," who is the same reporter that had contacted John asking to meet early in the story, and is also, of course, the body John found in the desert. In the hotel room, they find a USB stick with said reporter lady essentially completely laying out deep state conspiracy to smuggle terrorists into the U.S. Sunday reveals he also knew about this, and that the conspiracy is rampant in all levels of the federal government. Sure is easy to figure out a conspiracy when you're just handed the info by other people who did the work. Later, John and the Shadow Wolves intercept another convoy of cartel SUVs and manage to interrogate another member after a gunfight. John uses the brilliant deceptive tactic of saying 2 Arabic words, fooling the cartel member into thinking he's one of them, and thus confirms that the cartels are part of the conspiracy. However, it turns out that particular cartel member was a double agent working for some unnamed foreign power who spills the rest of the beans to John. He knew John was the one he had to link up with because the Shadow Wolves are the only trustworthy law enforcement group in America, for reasons. Anyway, Special Agent Wilson meets up with the jihadist leaders since, you guessed it, he's part of the deep state conspiracy too. One of them is Ali Malouf. Sorry, I can't say that name straight. And he says it's time to put the big plan into action. Apparently, this starts with blowing up a casino in Arizona, followed by many simultaneous attacks on places like the New York Stock Exchange, the Statue of Liberty, and the Grand Canyon. It also includes kidnapping John's mother, since Malouf and Wilson both extra hate his guts. They also asked Sweet Tooth and his brother Jimmy to help blow up the casino, even though their mother works there. Turns out that's the fatal flaw, since the brothers immediately run to the Shadow Wolves to prevent this from happening. The Shadow Wolves, who are suddenly a lot of people, attack a cave that Malouf and Wilson have brought John's mother to. They throw some snakes at the guards, bust in and do cool guy shit, and save John's mom. Then, they launch another attack at a second location where Malouf and Wilson are celebrating their plans coming to fruition. Wilson is killed. Malouf is bitten by a snake the Shadow Wolves brought along and immediately turns into a mewling mass that reveals the whole plan to them. John makes one phone call to a trustworthy source. America is saved. The end.
Thank you so much, Paris. Hopefully that was, in your estimation, a reasonable summation of what happened in this book. I skipped a lot of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
To be honest
Although,
with you.
to be fair, I will say America wasn't really saved. There's actually still a lot of casualties, and they sort of prevent the worst of all the attacks at each location. But in most cases, the bombs still go off, and just a couple people die, though, instead of, for example, the entire Sears Tower. They are able to evacuate the tower, so when the bombs go off, it just causes damage to the building and doesn't kill anyone, and etc. So America's sort of partially saved at the end, which, I guess I appreciated for some realism where it wasn't they completely stopped everything, because things were still in motion. So, hey, it gets a quarter of a point for that, I guess.
Speaking of points, it's time to start up with the rubric here, Paris.
All
Buckle
right.
in, everybody. We've already got shit to say in technical construction, so it's gonna be a long one.
Yep.
So, technical construction.
All right.
Paris, I'll let you start this.
Yeah, I guess before we even get into how the sentences are formed, I want to talk about the cover. I feel like that's part of technical construction or decor related.
For sure.
Right? It's how the book is physically put together. So let's do it. So
part of it.
In the most Mary Sue,
Technically construction.
right. In the most Mary Sue event of all time, Seagal is featured on the cover as presumably the main character, John, who is a Native American. I will note that this is just another entry in the long list of non-white identities. I guess OTW, Chris. We'll talk about that a little bit.
You will talk about that later.
Non-white identities that Seagal has appropriated over his lifetime. At various times, he has claimed to be Mohawk and said that he is pure Russian, growing up in a Russian household, even though he grew up in Lansing, Michigan, and raised by two Americans, his mother, who was Irish, and his father, the children of Russian Jewish immigrants. Look, I'm not going to sit here and get all fucking blood quantum on you, obviously, because that's white supremacist horseshit, too, but his history just stinks of appropriation of everything. I mean, he's supposedly Buddhist, but, the actions of his life say one thing, compared to him, saying he's Buddhist and practicing all these forms of martial arts like Bagua and Aikido and all this stuff. He's just somebody who... It seems like he'll sort of grasp at anything that will make him seem cooler or more important than other people. And for a lot of disillusioned white dudes in America or elsewhere, that's, finding a way to claim that you are not just white, right? That maybe you've got a little bit of Cherokee princess in you or whatever. So who knows? I mean, if he does have any indigenous ancestry, it certainly wasn't something that he was related to in life, let's say. And I mean, that goes for a lot of us. I'm sure many of us have indigenous ancestry but if you don't grow up in the culture, what does it mean? Nothing is the answer.
I kind of find Stephen to be sort of the king of cultural appropriation in a lot of ways.
You're right.
Goat.
I was trying to be a little more cautious, but you're right.
So while I was reading this book, I, sometimes share with my partner what I'm reading. I said, oh, yeah, I'm reading this book by Steven Seagal. And she's like, who's that? And I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
you don't know who Steven Seagal
all right, Rebecca's clearly an agent of the deep state. Like, nobody has grown up in America and no one doesn't know who fucking Steven Seagal is. What?
Apparently she is one untouched by this. And I had the task of defining Steven Seagal to her. And to, like, really distill it down, I had to go like, okay, imagine a white dude who pretends to be black and Native American and Chinese and a little Japanese all at the same time. And that's Steven Seagal.
Yeah, and sometimes he will outright say, I have X heritage, like with the Mohawk stuff and with Russia. I mean, again, his grandparents were Russian Jewish immigrants, as far as I can tell based on reporting from various media outlets. But he's acting like he grew up, like, fucking making Matryoshka dolls with his mom, and like everybody who knew him as a child was like, that's not the reality. But now, fast forward, he's now basically besties with Putin, with Vladimir Putin, and Putin actually gave him honorary Russian citizenship, so he is now a dual citizen with Russia. Interesting. And he was also appointed as a U.S. special envoy to Russia, I think in 2017. I might have that year wrong. I'm just sort of citing this from what I remember. But so in other ways, he'll just sort of infer that he has these connections rather than directly stating, like how, he lived in Japan for a period of time and therefore he kind of feels like he's allowed to adopt things like styles of dress or speaking and stuff. It just a lot of chameleon shit. And it comes off as pretty gross and not terribly genuine.
The reason we're bringing this up here is because the cover is just front and center Seagal with like a wolf face behind him. So clearly, even though this book is about someone named John Godet or John Good or whatever,
yeah.
This character is so Seagal coded that it is undeniably just like him writing out a straight to DVD Seagal movie in book form. And who's to say how much Seagal wrote versus Morrissey wrote, right? I feel like Seagal just like pitched the ideas and Morrissey did all the actual writing, but it's not like that helped. I can't believe this was written by two people.
Yeah, it's really surprising that two whole adult men were involved in this and this is the output. It's pretty shockingly bad. Yeah, the cover is just this weird Native American mystical, the magical Native American stereotype trope just made flesh, but like the fucking parasite crawled into Steven Seagal and it bloomed and this is what we got. And he's wearing a fringed jacket, he's got a big turquoise necklace and a denim shirt, and like you can see part of a gun holster, although I don't even know if he's wearing it correctly based on, I don't know, what do I know. He's got a big belt buckle and it's all like digitally drawn or photoshopped. It's like they took his body and then they photoshopped the clothing and jewelry onto it. It's very unsettling. Like you look at this and you immediately know something is wrong with not only the image but the contents of the book.
Like it was an image of some other cop and they just put Seagal's head on it. He's just culturally appropriating that guy's life somehow.
I mean, maybe. Yeah, so it's the cover, it's a whole thing.
As far as other technical construction stuff, I mean, the book like is reasonably constructed. I would say the only other offense I would put up here are the chapter titles, which are fucking horrendous.
Actually, I have one other thing, but we can read. Let's read some chapter titles. So, and we've discussed this before. Where like I just have a bee in my bonnet about chapter titles. I just don't. Most of the time, it's hard for me to get on board with them because I feel like I'm gonna read it. I know I'm gonna find out what's in there. I don't need a little snippy caption. I just find it kind of like a waste of space. Like you're just doing it to take up more space in a book. I don't know. I just don't enjoy them. But even then, I can appreciate when chapter titles are effective or used well. And this is just not one of those times. Chris, take it away with some chapter titles.
Chapter 3, Hot Girl, Bad Boys. I don't think there's even a hot girl in that chapter, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, all the ending ones are amazing. Just in the sequence, Jihad in the
They
desert.
don't have wait, there's no chapter list at the beginning of the book, which is horrendous. Like,
yeah, it's at the end.
What? Wait, hold on a fucking second. What do you mean?
The table of contents at the end. That's where it goes.
All right, -1 technical construction.
Yeah, actually, I forgot about that. Yeah,
I was looking for it to try to read.
I mean, I'm hoping this is just a mistake in the digital edition, but even so, the table of contents goes at the beginning, y'all. This is not where this goes. Just read 21 through 29, or 21 through 28. 21 through 20.
Fine, okay. 21, Deep State Jihadist Army revealed. 22, Grandfather's Ghost. 23, Dead Reporter talks. 24, Deep State Jihadists attack. 25, Cartel joins the jihad. 26, U.S. Marshals versus the Deep State. 27, Shadow Wolves fight for America's future. 28, the Saudi White House jihadist plan. 29, Ghost Warriors.
I just don't understand. Like, you're already reading the story. You know what's happening. And it's not like this is a book where things are ambiguous or hard to figure out. Like, it's really handing you things on a little plate. So it just seems so unnecessary.
Okay, straight up -1 for table of contents in the back.
Well,
I'm like, without anything else.
So while the sentences, they generally follow, they had a subject, they had an object, they had action words, they were fine. They weren't good. It was stilted, but at least they sentenced a little bit. However, I really took issue with a particular habit that the writers had, or writer, whoever decided this, where little phrases and stuff were just in quotations all the time, and it really took me out of the book. I mean, not that I was like deeply invested and enjoying myself at any point, but it just made me stop and go, why is this in quotation marks? And it happened so many times. Like, even occasionally when they say shadow wolves, sometimes it's in quotation marks, sometimes it's not. Why does it need to be in quotation marks? And there are other things, like sometimes they'll use quotation marks around slang, sometimes they won't. I don't understand the usage. It just is such a baffling choice where it's just a small thing that if they had just not done that, it honestly would have really helped, like, the flow of the text. It just
I think
breaks
this is like a boomer thing. This is like one of those things. Like, have you ever seen like people of that generation when they write out certain things, they always like put certain words in quote marks? Sometimes it's for slang things. Sometimes it's just for emphasis, I think.
Yeah, it just
it's bizarre.
Doesn't work. And again, it breaks your concentration. So, regardless of the poor writing or the shitty content, like just stuff like that. I mean, why? Why are we doing this? So strange. And it happens so many times. I'm sure I could just page through here, but we're going to read enough from this book, so I think I'm going to leave it at that.
There's so much to get to. We'll probably hit one of those as we're reading anyway.
Yeah, so -1 for technical construction. It's not, it's not great. Again, table of contents at the end, unnecessary chapter titles, the weird quotation things. I mean, again, that it's not like...
It's not as bad as some other things we've done, for sure.
Yeah. Are we being too hard? Should this just get a 0 for technical construction? I'm
willing to give it a 0.
Yeah, I kind of feel like we're being a little too hard on that part. I think we can give it a 0 and say that it at least is a book you can read. I was not...
Totally fair.
I was not often confused about the events of a certain paragraph. I was sometimes confused about the overall plot, but it wasn't horrendous. I think we can give this a 0 for technical construction. It's
okay.
Yeah, I think.
I was just so offended by the table of contents in the back because I was trying to find the chapter titles in the moment and be like, oh, I guess they don't have any. No, we put it in the back.
I mean, it's pretty horrible, but it's still books, right? Like,
yes,
it's still books.
Okay. So now we can move into plot construction.
Oh boy, we're going to be here for a bit. Make sure you are buckled into
Everyone
your black SUV in the desert.
Everyone drives SUVs. Why does everyone drive SUVs?
Because it's Arizona, Chris. It's not New England.
Well, okay, I guess fair enough. Not everyone's driving their Subarus out there. Okay. Where would you like to start, Paris? Because I don't even know where to begin.
Okay, I think I want to start with just a general vibe check. And the general vibe is it's giving warrior cats for dad. Like that's what we're getting. So
but like a specific kind of dad, right? Like the very like cool guy dad that might have a samurai sword in the bedroom.
Yeah, sunglasses at night, sunglasses during dinner kind of guy. But and I just want to say though that like, all right, you might not know this about actually, Chris, I don't know if this is about us or just me. I actually really enjoy good action movies and martial arts stuff. So, like, Under Siege was good. If, like, I mean, things that sort
agree.
Of early 90s action movie stuff, some of the 80s ones, like, I grew up loving Jean-Claude Van Damme. And, this might seem jarring to those who have listened to the show for a long time, but, like, I do find some of that really fun entertainment. A lot of it's dog shit, but there's plenty of stuff that's pretty good. And like the Seagal movie I always remember is Under Siege. I admittedly don't think I've ever seen another Seagal movie.
Oh boy.
And that's probably a good thing based on what I learned reading a little bit more about him and his films. So basically after Under Siege, it was like things just started going a little downhill. I mean, he did The Patriot, which people liked, even though it was like not a theatrical release or whatever. And there's plenty of Seagal films, but it was just like after, I feel like Under Siege was just the pinnacle, and then everything after that was sort of whatever. And this is kind of what this book is like. It's like a late 90s, early 2000s, straight to DVD Seagal movie, but it's got extra layers of stereotypes. And actually, it kind of seems like they sort of made this book into a movie already. Well, there's two movies. So there's one called Contract to Kill that already came out in 2016 that's kind of similar. There's another one called Tip of the Spear that sounds exactly like this plot that has been in production for a really long time, for years, that still hasn't come to fruition. So I think what happened is maybe he had this screenplay, couldn't get it picked up by a studio, and then decided to make it a book because like him and Joe Arpaio and Tom Morrissey are all friends in like real life, fucking triumvirate straight from the fifth level of hell right there.
Nightmare blunt rotation right there.
Yeah. Anyway, it really just feels like he must have had a screenplay kicking around that nobody would pick up, and it turned into this book. That's just a guess. I don't know that that's true, but it does feel that way, especially hearing all of the things that people who have worked with Seagal have said about him. I mean, there's a lot of things people have said. Again, this is, technically hearsay, right? But for example, somebody, like, he was working on a film once and somebody walked into the area he was sitting in or his trailer or something, and he was just like, "Oh man, I'm reading the script and it's like the best script I've ever read." And the person who walked in was like, "Oh, who wrote it?" And he goes, "Me." It's just just a weird person.
Okay, is it time to start getting into the meat of things here?
Yeah, I guess. Sorry, that was a little tangent. I was just saying that, like, so it's not as though I'm not predisposed to hate the idea of an action movie or like an action book or whatever. I just am not convinced that a book is a great place for a story like this, because part of the appeal of action plots is you get to see all of the cool stuff, like the martially arting and the explosions and the rattlesnakes biting or whatever, which we'll talk about later. And so I'm just a little skeptical. I just don't know that books are a great medium for this kind of thing. And I also think that you do have to work a little harder at a plot like this, because it's so easy for this stuff to become misogynistic, meat-headed, vapid, just absolutely devoid of any...
This isn't even just meathead. This is meat body. Like, it's just complete full...
Meat foot.
Okay, I think that's a good segue into, like, I would actually like to talk about the whole, deep state conspiracy that's happening in here, and like just kind of like dig into like what the actual plot is. You have a point in here about how it is the most, tell instead of show thing in the world.
Yes.
There's a chapter, it's like chapter 4 where I mentioned it in the summary, where there's just like some federal agent that never shows up again in the entire story sitting in his office, and he's like, all right, let's get the people on the inside and the DEA to like get this part in motion. Let's get the people on the inside over here to smuggle these people across the border. Just laying everything out for the reader completely so that there's no sense of mystery whatsoever. You're
That's a Special Agent Mo Dogface Minor. That's who he is, and he starts off saying, POTUS has sent me a secure message. She has 1,000 more invited guests, as the local sheriff calls them, coming over the border in the next month, and he is counting on us to give them free passage. Yeah, there's no mystery, right? So regardless of how we feel about the content of this, why am I reading this? There's no mystery. I don't care. You tell me exactly what the villain is doing and why at the get. It's just not
Yeah, on top of that, so the deal here is that embedded within the U.S. federal government are thousands of people that want to destroy America from the inside for reasons.
They want to turn it into a Islamist jihadist state. Is that correct?
Yeah, sort of. Like, I think even the people in the government, it doesn't necessarily say that, like, Special Agent Dogface is Muslim or anything like that.
Well, but he says
He's
the
just a guy
president is, you see, because
Sure.
Seagal and Arpaio and co are all on board with the quote-unquote birther conspiracy. You may remember where they think that former President Barack Obama was not actually born here and was actually Muslim and evil and yada yada, racism and or whatever, all that stuff.
So, the president, unnamed in this book, but clearly Barack Obama, has convinced thousands of people that are already working for the government or placed people in the government.
Well, I think he's
that
a tool.
Are on board.
No, he is a tool of George Soros. I mean, Lord Loros, Sir Laris, Sir Laris.
Yeah,
there actually is.
What I'm trying to say here is that there's like thousands of just straight up American people that aren't Muslim involved in this, and there's no digging into why they might want this to happen. It is just, there's thousands of people embedded in the government at all points, in all agencies, in all ways.
There's evil.
And distributed throughout America. At one point, Paris, did you remember the line towards the end where it's like, they're doctors, they're lawyers, they're agents, they're dentists? Like, there's like,
I mean, hey man, look, Chris, even in the caliphate, we got teeth to take care of, okay? You can't.
How are the dentists trying to help bring about the fucking destruction of America? You don't really have to floss all the time. Floss is just a conspiracy.
I mean, Chris, have you gotten a dentist bill recently? Like, don't you think, if anything...
that's what it is?
Yeah. But, I mean, I think the thing that really gets me is this just sounds like Project 2025.
Yeah, because it is. It's the same thing.
And that's
the hilarious part about this.
Except with Project 2025, everyone involved is actually a Christian nationalist who does want to turn America into, a nationalist Christian jihadist state, let's say, instead of an Islamist one, right? So it's just bonkers to me that, everything with these people is fucking projection. Every time I'm like, it can't be that simple. And yet it is every single time. It really is. So although this book came out well before Project 2025 was, publicly known, I actually don't know how long that plan has been fomenting. I don't know if it was since the last administration or prior. But it's just that. But, at least with that, I understand why the people who are behind Project 2025 and the Christian nationalists want to bend America to their will. I understand their motivations. I obviously don't agree with them, but I understand that they want power. It's usually that. It's usually power and to remain better than everyone around them in their fucked up view of the world and society, right? In this, we don't even get that sliver of understanding. We just get, it's all about money. And it's like, well, yeah, money is part of it, but there's just no good villain in this because there's no good humanizing of the villain and like trying to give you a little bit of a grayness about them. They sort of try for like one chapter where they're like, oh, this guy was turned into a cartel soldier at like 10 because he had to kill someone to survive. And yeah, but it's just lip service.
That's
it's
the motivation for like
well.
that one particular character to be involved in the cartels, but we get nothing about, again, why literally thousands of people down to the dentists embedded in American society want to have this happen. It's just, well, because they hate America.
Yeah.
We're not going to dive into any reason like why that might even be. Okay. That's just the top level motivational aspect that is immediately shallow. On top of that, the methods. So we're bringing in, according to the book, thousands of extremist terrorists a month.
Yes.
Through the Mexican border being smuggled through.
Right. It's like 1,000 a month, assigned, and usually in groups of 500 at a time. And they're being driven in like school buses with like FBI SUVs behind them. And I'm like, yo, even if like NBC doesn't air this, like the local news somewhere is like, hey, this TikTok video has been making the rounds. Like, fucking
like, it's
weird.
like a lot of school buses and shit, man. Like,
full of adults with FBI vehicles following them. Like, just super conspicuous.
Every month.
Yeah, like all the time.
And like thousands a month. Like, to me, this is the big clue that the authors just view Middle Eastern people or Arab people as a whole as like Muslim extremists, because I don't think there's as many extremists out there as these people believe. Because if you're doing 1,000 a month, I don't know, like over the course of maybe a couple of years, you could probably bring most of the terror cells across the ocean into America at that point.
Yeah, I mean, don't underestimate the hatred of America across the world due to U.S. imperialism and, genocide. But, there are quite a few people who would probably do. But I agree, it is cartoonish in its depiction. It just doesn't. Yeah, it's more laughable than scary, and I think you can see that their intention is like, oh, this is scary, when in reality it's just kind of silly, really. And, I'm not going to sit here and spout anything naive. Like, it's not like I'm going to say, oh, we don't have anyone coming across the border who's, involved in terror or whatever. But, there's always going to be some. We have many people trying to immigrate to the United States, not often successfully, due to the policies that we have, right? So I'm not going to say like, oh, none of this is real. In fact, the night before yesterday, we were talking about we were having a very brief conversation about recording today. And I opened Reddit, and one of the first news articles I see is like 800 terrorists like get into the U.S. And I was like, through the Mexican border. And I was like, this can't be real. And I opened the article, and of course it is a little overblown. It was more like approximately 800 people from Middle Eastern countries who we don't know super well came in, and we don't know where they are, which to me doesn't mean Islamist terrorists.
That's
right,
very different.
Very different. So yeah, I again, it's not like I just don't want to be confused with somebody who's like, none of this has any basis in fact. It's like, yes, I understand why people have some apprehension about this, but the way it's described by people like this, and honestly even by a lot of major media networks, is just absolutely not accurate.
It's like a silly scale, right? Like thousands a month, or like
remember the
like
caravans? Remember the caravans that were cited that
and on top
real?
of that, so if you're on board with like a whole deep state conspiracy that's backing these people and bringing them in and embedding them throughout America, why do you need to bring them over the Mexican border? If it's all federal agencies, just fucking fly them in, right?
Yeah,
like,
just bring them in by boat. Just bring them in through fucking Washington State, through Seattle. I don't know.
Why does it have to be this direction? Okay, moving on. The plan is to launch a simultaneous attack on many spots at once to blow a lot of places up, like the New York Stock Exchange, so that there's financial disaster. the Statue of Liberty because it's a symbol of America.
Right.
And also a glass bridge across the Grand Canyon.
Okay, all right. Look, when you've got Mount Rushmore right over there in South Dakota, and you're like, never mind the glass bridge at the Grand Canyon, I am questioning your whole strategy here.
Why is this part of the plan?
It's a big landmark, but like again, Mount Rushmore with the
like
president's
the Grand Canyon
faces.
is like patriotic. It's not like I'm proud to be an American. Where's a big hole in the fucking ground?
I mean, but again, you've got Mount Rushmore, which is a desecrated mountain with president faces on it. Like, blow up the president faces, restore it to its previous glory.
Is the glass bridge like a big shipping lane or something?
I
don't think it is. They probably go around. I imagine the trucks go around the Grand Canyon when they're shipping things, right? They don't all go over the glass bridge. That's probably not very structurally sound.
Yeah, I've never been there. I'm actually going to look it up.
No, I'm not going to say not structurally sound, like not enough to support shipping, which is maybe the reason you might want to blow up the bridge over the Grand Canyon. When I first saw the Grand Canyon,
it's not even a bridge. It's a fucking little loop of a skywalk. What the fuck? This is so weird. Okay, it's a horseshoe shaped. I mean, I guess it's technically a bridge, but it's just a little horseshoe where you can walk out over the ledge.
They brought like rocket launchers over to like blow that shit up. It's like, why are you spending the resources there?
No, I think the reason is let me see if this is true. I think the Grand Canyon is the most visited landmark, so maybe this was a quantity decision.
Okay, but even then, I feel like there's more populous areas to unleash an attack upon.
Yeah, maybe I'm wrong.
I want to say
it's one of the big ones. I don't fucking know.
When I first read this in the book, I missed the part about the glass bridge, so it just looked like they were attacking the Grand Canyon itself. I was like, it's already a big hole in the ground. What are you just going to make it like a little bit wider?
No, Chris.
I don't understand.
Chris, they're going to fill it in.
Oh shit! Thousands of jihadists with concrete bags pouring it all in at the same time.
Oh, how you like that, America?
Not our hole. They filled America's hole. What are we gonna do now?
Oh God. Yeah. Similarly, one of their cartoonish plot points of this grand, sophisticated conspiracy is, well, we think this USB stick or SD card or whatever with some interviews on it is in this casino and we can't find it, so blow up the whole casino? What? I found that to be absurd, because why would they care? They could just deny everything. It's not like those interviews had documentation. It wasn't documents, right? Am I wrong about this? It was just a verbal audio recording.
The reporter lady like doing interviews with people, and you could easily just say no, that's not true.
Yeah, or was it just her speaking into a microphone?
It was mostly her speaking. Like they didn't even mention. Like, I'm assuming there must have been taped interviews on there, or else why the fuck would they care about it at all? On top of this, the plan to blow up the casino is sort of like handed off to Sweet Tooth and Jimmy to like assist in it when their mom works in there. And it's not like the leaders were like, oh, we didn't know their mom worked in there, so they might turn on us. They were like, yeah, your mom works in there. Go fucking blow it up, assholes.
Yeah, like it was a test.
Don't put that part of your plot in the hands of people that might not do it.
Yeah, I just and there's no reason to test these low-level guys with this ostensibly, as they are seeing it, important thing. Just get it done. Don't ask the guys who, like you said, who might not carry it out because their mother will die in the attack. It's just, again, very silly. Another thing I do want to say, though, is that I kind of understand how people get here with conspiracies sometimes because, U.S. imperialism has continued to perpetrate crimes against humanity, like both on American soil and off. We've got like COINTELPRO, the quote unquote crack epidemic, right? Even some, the stuff leaked by Assange, regardless of how you feel about that being leaked, the truth of those things is undisputed. I get why people are like, wow, there must be something rotten in the federal government, because time and time again we find that there is, right? So then people spin it into this thing that it is not, right? It just turns into, I don't know how to describe it, but instead of focusing on the actual evils, they weaponize the fake evils against people they don't like. You know, it's sort of this weird, again, like telling on yourselves kind of a situation where they're like, oh, it's the evil deep state, but it's like, yeah, but Project 2025 isn't a democratic project, last I checked.
Yeah, I can vibe with that.
Yeah, it's like, so I don't want to sit here and be like, oh, I'm so fucking stupid and naive. Like, these conspiracies are dumb. It's like, yeah, a lot of conspiracies are dumb, but you have to understand that people get there not because there isn't like a little breadcrumb trail, right? Like, there is some things to make you go, huh, well, you know, if the government has done all of these things, why not also this, right? And if you're not thinking critically, then it's pretty easy to get pulled into stuff like this. And I understand how this can happen.
Yeah, on top of that, for me, it's always the scale of the involvement of people and like how big the network is. I think where I always lose it is essentially the type of person that thinks it's super well organized from the top down at every level and everyone is reaching for the same goal. Mm-hmm. I just can't vibe with that generally, when in my experience, more of the time it's a morass of people with disparate goals that all just want their own form of money or power in some way. And those will align periodically to make stuff shit for the rest of everyone else.
Yeah.
But it's not like there's this, like, the deep state conspiracy to import people into America to blow shit up. Like,
and again, if you have that level of control with tens of thousands of people part of the plan, why does it have to be deep? You can just be out on the surface, bro.
Right.
But this book traffics in, like Chris was talking about, this sort of top-down George Soros big bank, you know, aka coded anti-Semitic tropes about, you know, oh, it's all paid for by the billionaire, you know, bankers, which again is always code for Jewish people. Although that's not outrightly said, that's usually what that means. So this book traffics, so that this is part of that whole thing. Yeah, it's gross. It's gross and obviously untrue, but again, it's not, I kind of understand how people end up here, and it's frustrating, and I wish people thought harder about stuff, but you know.
Speaking of thinking hard, I think another really disappointing part of this book is that John is supposed to be this guy that, like, he's following his gut, and like all the time he's correct. Like, his gut is always correct, right?
Every time.
But in the same way, John's never the one that really figures it out.
No.
It's always just that, oh, he finds the USB stick where the reporter just dumps all the info on him, or his friend Sunday comes in and just says like, oh yeah, no, I've been working deep undercover and I figured all this shit out. Or like the final piece of the puzzle is put in place by another deep undercover agent that he happens to pick up on an intercepted like SUV convoy, and the whole time that agent is like, yeah, I knew you'd find me. How the fuck
this is all connected to the magical Native American dusting. Actually, it's quite caked into this text. So you know, his gut is always right because his dead grandfather is guiding him as his, like, I don't know, spirit helper or whatever, because he's a shadow wolf and Native American, and therefore, oh, he's so spiritual and tied into the non-human supernatural environment, and therefore all these things just happen for him. Like, you know, he finds the hidden USB or SD card or whatever because he wants a cup of coffee, and when he went to get a cup of coffee earlier, the line was too long. So, of course, when they're in the dead reporter's hotel room, he's like, oh, I'll just use this. Even though that is a whole, like, this is a crime scene.
Right.
Scene?
Like, I'm in this, like, dead reporter's, like, hey, I can make some coffee while I'm here. I mean, your fingerprints all over the fucking coffee machine.
Yeah. I guess at that point, they don't know she's dead, but still, if she's missing, you probably shouldn't make coffee in the fucking coffee pot in the room. Anyway, he opens it, and there's the SD card, right, or the USB or whatever it is. Yeah, so that's the explanation. It's just silly. And there's similarly the book states multiple times, like, you can only ever trust a shadow wolf, only the shadow wolves. But then they get betrayed by one of their own, so it's like, okay, so you have this,
I guess not that one.
So maybe don't make a big deal out of it, or like at least explain to us why Bellamy, who's not important, this whole betrayal part is, it takes place over the course of about 3 pages in the entire 217-page book. So it's not a notable plot point, but we don't even understand his motivations for the betrayal. I mean, if you're a shadow wolf, why the fuck would you betray your other shadow wolves? Why would you do that?
Okay. Is there anything else in the general coherence section that we want to go over?
Yeah. I actually wanted to say that this book taught me that shadow wolves are real. I went into this thinking...
Oh, shit. Oh, fuck. Are they hiding in the brush for us right now?
No.
About to snipe us?
No. But I seriously thought this was just complete bullshit. And then I was reading about it, and I was like, oh my God, this is real. So I'm just going to read a little to you from... I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm going to read a little to you from ice.gov about who the Shadow Wolves are.
All right. Great.
The Shadow Wolves are a Native American tactical patrol unit assigned to Homeland Security investigations in Sells, Arizona, located on the Tohono O'odham Nation. The name Shadow Wolves refers to the way the unit hunts, like a wolf pack. The Shadow Wolves specialize in the interdiction of human and drug smugglers through the rugged terrain of the Sonoran Desert, utilizing both technology and the traditional art of tracking. Despite the use of high-tech equipment, the unit relies on their ability to track, a technique called cutting for sign, which includes any kind of physical evidence left by smugglers, like footprints, tire tracks, thread, clothing, etc. This elite unit was established by congressional mandate in 1974 in response to rampant smuggling occurring through the Tohono O'odham Nation. Key facts. The Shadow Wolves are the Department of Homeland Security's only Native American tracking unit specifically utilized for targeted interdiction operations. The Tohono O'odham Nation, controlled by the Shadow Wolves, covers 2.8 million acres, including a 76-mile stretch of land shared with Mexico. The Shadow Wolves are a key component of the Native American Targeted Investigations of Violent Enterprises, NATIVE Task Force, a high-intensity drug trafficking area HIDTA initiative formed in August 2013 to disrupt and dismantle drug trafficking organizations operating within or through the Tohono O'odham Nation. NATIVE's partners include HSI, the Tohono O'odham Police Department, the Bureau of Indian Affairs Drug Enforcement Division, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and the Bureau of Land Management. Congress has recently introduced a bill to modernize the Shadow Wolves program by providing the flexibility to reclassify the Shadow Wolves, current and future, from GS 1801 tactical officers to GS 1811 special agents. This change would broaden the Shadow Wolves' authorities while preserving the important legacy of the unit. Yeah, and then there's a whole bunch of details on things they've done and how, yeah, this is a totally real thing. I was absolutely shocked by this. I seriously, I knew nothing about this. So learn something new. Thanks, Steven Seagal and Tom Morrissey, I guess. So yeah, kind of wild. Definitely not something I would have guessed, but
it does sound like something a 13-year-old would come up with,
yes,
right? That's why it feels so dorky.
The difference though in between the book and this is that the unit, as far as I know, well, as far as I can find, they're only allotted to have about 21 members, and they usually have between 15 and 20. The book makes it out to be like hundreds of Shadow Wolves all across the United States, which is a misrepresentation of what this is. Also, the unit does not profess to have like spiritual connections and literal Shadow Wolves who kiss them on the forehead, a real thing that happens in this book twice. I'm going to read to you shortly. And I also learned that the documentary that is depicted in like the first page of the book, where Chris and I were very confused by, is a real documentary called Shadow Wolves: Tracking of a Documentary, which profiles the group. So that's a real thing. But again, the book doesn't tell you that. The book doesn't ever tell you, hey, this is real. It just sounds like you said, it sounds like a third grader's like fantasy book that he had to write for class or something.
Okay. Would we like to move into the rules following section of the plot construction? This is point 1 of rubric level 2 here.
Yes. I guess I just want to say that, no, you know what? You know what? In terms of coherence, I would like to read the beginning and end of the book because they're the same pieces of writing, and I just want to make sure I'm not crazy.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Sanity check.
Sanity check. So when I was reading this, I was reading the end, and I was like, why does this feel like the very beginning of the book again? It's really weird. It kind of feels word for word like the beginning of the book. So let's do a little experiment here. We'll read the forward and preface later, I guess. But third to fourth page of the book. The Arizona desert sky was full of color as the sun set, and the spirit of the night began to stir. The clouds, a brilliant orange, were hanging on the horizon with sun rays lighting them from the bottom up as the daylight crept behind the mountains, off in the distance, but not too far from where a man named John Godet was standing. A dust devil was dancing across a place between him and the setting sun. This tall, lean man, who in the approaching darkness could have easily been confused with a saguaro cactus, was breathing in the beautiful scene before him. He was fully aware of a man standing behind him, about 80 feet away in the desert foliage. At first, that man seemed to be taking photos of the evening desert that lay some 30 miles south of Phoenix and less than 10 seconds from Washington, D.C. The Native American John Nantan Godet had classic chiseled features and was born and raised on the reservation, leaving it at age 18 after graduating high school to join the United States Marines. It was clear even in boot camp that he had something unique going. That had its genesis in the words of his grandfather, who had taught him the quote-unquote old ways, starting when he was 13 years old. His spirit was totally connected to this land. He knew that when he walked this desert, he was stepping where the many brave, bold, and sometimes naive men who preceded him once walked. He could feel their energy and sense their spirit with the way things were playing out in their culture. How they had been led down a path of total dependence by an elite group of politicians who were concerned only with absolute power. Nothing more, nothing less. He could hear what sounded like clicking behind him as the sound rode the desert air to his animal-like ears. There were others who had joined the man, but there was no conversation accompanying their arrival. The one with the camera device used hand signals to communicate with them. About 20 feet where John was standing was a rise in the land. He proceeded with what he was doing despite the action behind him, moving slowly toward it while shaking his fist in the air. This was his grandfather's quote-unquote old ways method of bidding the sun a good night and asking it to return in the morning. As he was ceremonially dancing and chanting toward the rise, he suddenly dropped to his knees. Then he began his shaman-natured ritual celebrating the spirit of the wolf, the dominant creature of the night. As he chanted, a shadowy wolf slowly approached him out of the encroaching darkness, kissed his forehead, and stood there for a moment, watching him. After a moment, the animal turned and looked at the men who had stopped dead in their tracks as they approached from behind. The mysterious wolf's fierce eyes glared at them as they froze in place. He then slowly turned his glance back to the kneeling Native American, kissing his forehead again, before disappearing back into the shadows. That's a wolf I'm talking about, by the way. At that point, John heard movement coming from what sounded like 3 men. He got back to his feet and continued dancing his way into the darkness. He went behind the rise from where he was able to observe them, but they could not see him. He was a ghost warrior known as a shadow wolf, one who could easily blend with the night, disappear into the darkness at will. They spread out, moving swiftly without making a sound, closing in from different directions on the place where they last saw him. All 3 had been startled by the appearance of the wolf and prepared themselves should it attack them. John's first thoughts were that they were sent by one of the drug cartels to take him out because of his success with intercepting their supply lines into Arizona. He remained part of the darkness, blended with the desert landscape, observing them, totally hidden from their eyes, his Sig Sauer in his hand poised at the ready. As suddenly as they appeared, they were gone. Motionless, John held his position for another 10 minutes to make certain they weren't doing the same and waiting for him to move. After a short time, the night sounds of the desert and his spirit wolf helped him to know they were gone. I thought that we'd gotten them all, but maybe I was wrong. Never underestimate the deep state, was John's lingering thought. Okay, so that's page 3 and half of page 4. Now, I'm going to read page 217 and 218. And you tell me if they're not the same fucking thing, copy and pasted.
All right.
A few days later, the Arizona desert sky was full of color as the sun set, and the spirit of the night began to stir. The clouds, a brilliant orange, were hanging on the horizon with sun rays lighting them from the bottom up as the daylight crept behind the mountains. Off in the distance, but not too far from where a man named John Godet was standing, a dust devil was dancing across a place between him and the setting sun. This tall, lean man, who, in the approaching darkness, could have easily been confused with a saguaro cactus, was breathing in the beautiful scene before him. he was fully aware of a man standing behind him about 80 feet away in the desert foliage. At first, that man seemed to be taking photos of the evening desert that lay some 30 miles south of Phoenix and less than 10 seconds from Washington, D.C. Again, what the fuck?
What?
He could hear what sounded like clicking behind him as the sound rode the desert air to his animal-like ears. There were others who had joined the man, but there was no conversation accompanying their arrival. The one with the camera device used hand signals to communicate with them. About 20 feet from where John was standing was a rise in the land. He proceeded with what he was doing, despite the action behind him, moving slowly toward it while shaking his fist in the air. This was his grandfather's quote-unquote old ways method of bidding the sun a good night and asking it to return in the morning. As he was ceremonially dancing and chanting toward the rise, he suddenly dropped to his knees. Then he began his shaman-natured ritual celebrating the spirit of the wolf, the dominant creature of the night. As he chanted, a shadowy wolf slowly approached him out of the encroaching darkness, kissed his forehead, and stood there for a moment watching him. After a moment, the animal turned and looked at the men who had stopped dead in their tracks as they approached from behind. The mysterious wolf's fierce eyes glared at them as they froze in place. He then slowly turned his glance back to the kneeling Native American, kissing his forehead again before disappearing into the shadows. At that point, John heard movement coming from what sounded like 3 men. He got back to his feet and continued dancing his way into the darkness. He went behind the rise from where he was able to observe them, but they could not see him. He was a ghost warrior known as a shadow wolf, one who could easily blend with the night, disappear into the darkness at will. They spread out, moving swiftly without making a sound, closing in from different directions of the place where they last saw him. All 3 had been startled by the appearance of the wolf and prepared themselves should it attack them. John's first thoughts were that they were sent by one of the drug cartels to take him out because of his success with intercepting their supply lines into Arizona. He remained part of the darkness, blended with the desert landscape, observing them, totally hidden from their eyes, his Sig Sauer in his hand, poised at the ready. As suddenly as they appeared, they were gone. Motionless, John held his position for another 10 minutes to make certain that they weren't doing the same and waiting for him to move. After a short time, the night sounds of the desert and his spirit wolf helped him to know they were gone. I thought we had gotten them all, but maybe I was wrong. Never underestimate the deep state, was John's lingering thought. Why did we repeat 2 entire pages? Like, it's the weirdest
to be
bookend.
Like a Quentin Tarantino-ing thing?
Yeah, I don't know, but I was like, I can't believe I'm reading the same exact thing again.
So, yeah, if you were just driving in your car or, like, cleaning your house to listen to this podcast, and you're like, wait a minute, did I skip backwards accidentally? No, you did not.
Yeah, there's so much padding in this. It doesn't even need to be 220 pages. I remember I was halfway through, and I was like, how is there still another 110 pages in this? Like, I don't know. Anyway, this is some of the, the poor content in this book in prose quality, which I guess we're now talking about. Wait, what are we talking about? Rules? We're talking about rules.
Yeah, we're in the rules following.
Sorry, I just wanted to talk about the weird attempted, like, we're going to do the same thing we did at the beginning, and I just don't understand why you would do that. It's very stupid. All right, rules. Oh, is this where we read the foreword and the preface because they set out some rules
Paris,
for us?
We have too much to read here. We gotta just leave some shit out, I think.
Can I at least read the dedication? Because I think that's where we start.
Yes.
All right. All right, I'm going to read this dedication. I want you all to think real hard about how these things pair together. We dedicate this book to the Native Americans who were victims of genocide by the early invaders from Europe. To the tribal police who combine the old ways and the new to defend our border with intelligence and integrity. To the U.S. Marshals, most of whom represent the ideal of the Texas Rangers, the goodness of the nation in one man, one badge riding alone. And finally, to the average American citizen, awakened and finally perhaps ready to confront the deep state and restore our Constitution. Wait, they want us to be woke now? I thought they didn't like being woke. All right, so there's something particularly fucked up about saying we dedicate this book to Native Americans who were genocided and the tribal police, and then following that with we also dedicate this to the spirit of the Texas Rangers, because the Texas Rangers, if any of y'all remember, were basically created to murder Native Americans. That was their whole purpose was to quote unquote protect settlers, right, in Texas, and we all know what that means, right? So it's just a bizarre pairing, and I feel like that really sets the tone. That really sets the rules. Speaking of rules, it also says immediately after that this is a work of fiction, and any resemblance to anyone living or dead is purely coincidental, but always remember that the truth comes in many forms. I don't understand why they're not more direct. Why didn't they just print Barack Obama? Why didn't they just print actual? I don't understand this whole we're pretending that this is fictional, and yet it's so obvious that they're talking about real people, but they're too chicken shit to say it. I mean, I'm wondering if they were just concerned that they were going to get sued for slander, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe.
But it's fiction.
I hate that
right?
dancing around shit where it's like, it's fiction, but it's not. But it's fiction, but it's not. Like,
and don't worry.
Chicken shit is the best word to describe it.
Yeah, and don't worry. We've got Joe Arpaio, who, you may remember for his torture of prisoners in Maricopa County and other various crimes against humanity that you can read about yourself on Wikipedia or any other place on the internet that discusses Joe Arpaio's history. But I think reading his forward is pretty necessary. Chris, do you want to play Joe Arpaio right now? Because I just did a lot of reading.
How do I play? Yeah, like, I don't even know if I can get into this character here. Let me see what
you may never come back from that. Don't go too deep.
Okay. Forward. I strongly identify with this book because in many ways I lived what's portrayed on its pages. During my over 26-year career in DEA, I worked as a young agent in the mountains of Turkey, often on my own, chasing illegal drug merchants as part of the war on drugs. Many times, although unknown to me, I had to work side by side with individuals who were actually sabotaging my efforts and even putting my life in danger. This was because they were on the payroll of the illicit drug underground. I was promoted to regional director of the DEA office in Mexico and Latin America. What I experienced during that time brought me an understanding of the mindset and customs of the drug cartels, which drive these organizations to this very day. As the longest-serving elected sheriff in Maricopa County, Arizona history, I brought my experience to that organization. Arizona today is and has been ground zero concerning illegal immigration and drug running. The deserts of this great state contain the hidden highways used by drug cartels as they pour across our unsecured borders. That flow has slowed under President Donald Trump, however. There are powers known today as the deep state working against his efforts. The activities of the deep state operatives are a grave danger to our country because they are working against the effort to secure our borders. It is my belief that books such as this bring a better understanding through fiction. This will help to bring an awakening, which has been smothered by the entrenched leftist mindset that dominates the creative media in this country today. I know and have worked with Steven Seagal, who is a law enforcement officer along with being an international movie star. He has an unusual understanding of the world in which the story takes place.
I agree with you there.
During this time with my office, he proved his skills as a fugitive hunter when he arrested one of our top fugitives within 48 hours after beginning the search for him. He brought us a new and extremely effective way of getting the job done. I first met Tom Morrissey when he was a chief deputy U.S. Marshal for the Federal District of Arizona. We came to be close allies and united our agencies as we fought the good fight against the evolving threat of illegal drugs that were moving through Arizona. Both of these men bring their experiences to life on the pages of this book. It is my hope that you have not only enjoyed the storyline of The Way of the Shadow Wolves, but you will also think about the message portrayed here. It is less than a hair's breadth from the frightening truth of what is actually happening today in America.
Right, so it's not
Sheriff Joe Arpaio.
It's not really fiction. It's fiction, but it's not really fiction.
It's the hair's breadth. That's why we can have plausible deniability.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Chris. Thank you for reading the Joe Arpaio forward, a sentence I have had to say.
I don't even know what music I'm going to put under that. That's going to be a fucker to figure out.
Oh, man. There's also another curious thing about Seagal that I don't really understand is that he is... he says he's an environmentalist. He's gone on he's like done, I don't know, various crusades against certain environmental causes, and I just don't know how he squares support for environmentalism with the right wingery, especially when a big component of the whole conservative right wing plan is allowing businesses to pollute as much as they want and dismantling the EPA or at least defanging it. So it's curious to me that I just don't understand how you can hold both of those together. People are complicated, I guess.
Right, it's not a monolith. It's not like everyone believes every talking point of like a right-wing thing. But I think a lot of folks like this just square it away with like, oh, well, they won't do that if we deregulate them. There's good people in these companies. Or like people will boycott the companies and they won't buy the stuff when, you know, they're subsidized in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's the whole libertarian idea that like people will inherently do the right thing, quote unquote, and that's just not true, especially when those quote unquote people are corporations that we've now deputized as people, I guess.
Yes. Further non-rules following. So at one point, at many points in the book, actually, it goes on a lot about how shadow wolves just blend into the night. It doesn't really describe how. It's just a sentence where they will be blend.
They wear silence. They wear silence, right? Isn't that they just dress in black, right? Like, isn't that their whole
don't know,
thing?
but like every sentence that talks about this is they just blend. They just do it. They
blend.
roll a nat 20 all the time on their skill checks, I suppose. But then in the same breath, it will talk about how, like we mentioned before, they're rolling in giant SUV convoys packed to the gills with weapons. There's a scene towards the end of the book where they're sneaking up on a cave to ambush some of the deep state conspiracy folks and jihadists and whatnot. And I thought, I'm assuming as I'm reading it, like, oh, they're crawling along their bellies or like sneaking up on it. Sure. But like as they get closer, it's like they dropped to their knees. And I was like, you're just walking up to the cave mouth? How is that blending into the night?
And this is when they're like, we think they have night vision goggles, so stay low. And it's like, what? You were just walking. That's not low. Yeah, and
they would have seen you coming from afar. The desert is pretty flat as far as I know.
The funny thing, too, is all these pictures I'm seeing of actual shadow wolves, they're wearing, like, variations of desert camo. They're not dressed in black. And he's always talking about how the shadow wolves are always dressed all in black, but it doesn't seem like that's... Not that necessarily has to be true to life, but it's just a little weird. And again, the whole reasoning in the book, you know, the book's internal logic is magical Native American stuff. That's why you get kissed by a wolf. Kissed by a wolf in the dark.
On the forehead. I'm gonna kiss the wolf again because it's a handsome wolf.
So, like, by their logic, you know, you get a little forehead kissy from a shadow wolf, and you know, you're just good. You can disappear into the shadows. You're a superstar, yada yada. And it's a really like offensive view of indigenous people and, you know, Native Americans in America. And they even mention a few times like, "Whoa, can't call them Indians. They'll think that's not sensitive or not politically correct." And it's like, actually, Native Americans often call themselves Indian, or they'll use the actual, whatever their language is, they'll use the word for people or something to refer to themselves. So I just think that's funny. Like, no, it's more of a white people thing. Like, we generally don't want to call Native Americans Indians because it can sometimes come off as pejorative, right? But they themselves will call themselves Indians. That's fine. And usually they're not offended by that usage unless you are intentionally trying to be an asshole like this book sometimes.
Yes. Okay. I mean, there's
no
a lot
one's ever
of other,
Mirandized in this book, Chris.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, never ever. Like, that's just a big rule that is broken in general, I would say. And just like another silly point off the cuff here is that, you know, in the same area of like establishing something and then breaking that immediately, at what point John is like, we have to go back to code talking like the Navajo did. And they fucking never do anything like that.
They never use...
Why drop that shit in?
Yeah, they never use any kind of native language in this. It's bizarre.
Let's move into character quality here. And honestly, Paris, my fucking favorite thing about this book is, you know, John just obviously being a Steven Seagal character that's written out in book form. Yeah. But his whole
same character in every movie, by the way.
It is. And his whole character is, I just don't fucking think, bro. It's all about just like following his gut and never arriving at any conclusion through reasoning. And there's so much about him going stone face and empty mind and like just like being void of all thought. It's so fucking funny to me that the whole point of this character is like, I never fucking think anything through. I just am reactive and act without doing any sort of thought at all.
Yep.
And I'm always right.
Yeah, and he's like, and it's because stone face and empty mind are like Bagua tactics, or I forget if he attributes it to Bagua or to some other martial art. You just no thoughts, just do, no think.
don't even begin to have a single thought in your head.
And yeah, it's supposed to be this sort of like, oh, aren't I so elevated and more cultured and experienced than you, where I can just go to my mental happy place and just know what to do without thinking. But it just comes off as, meat-footed bullshit or meat-bodied, as we say.
Yeah, it's just a really funny point to me that the character is so Seagal coded.
Every character is a complete caricature down to the last. I mean, I don't know that we need to do much, but I just want to read some names that really got some giggles out of me.
Uh-huh.
One of the big bad guys introduced at the very end is Ali Malouf. He's a little aloof. He's a little aloof.
A little Maloof.
Midway through, we get meant to be gay. I don't know. I'm meant to be gay, but
I forgot. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's the mother that was going to get blown up in the casino.
Yeah, Jimmy
meant
and
to not
Sweet
get blown
Tooth
up.
Begay. And then Nero Agave. I don't know why that one was just felt like people were just pulling names out of a hat. Nero Agave.
Yeah.
Oh, I love
Sounds
it.
like some sort of drink, right? Like it's just a beverage of some kind.
Well, tequila is made from agave, right? That's how
True.
that goes.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Anyway, these silly names. It's just stupid. It's not.
We already talked about how the villains are cartoonish, so I'm really going to gloss over that. I also want to talk about how women are treated in this book.
Yeah.
To be clear, Alicia, the Shadow Wolf lady, does perhaps the most skilled shit in
She's
this
pretty
entire
cool.
book.
I mean, she's a paper cutout. She's like a paper doll, but she's fine. Yeah.
There's one shootout where she pops out from behind a car and strafes 4 dudes and nails them with a headshot across. That is impossible to fucking do.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult.
So credit where it's due. It's not like all women are only that, but they're also clearly here to be objectified because it always talks about Alicia's long dark hair flowing.
Yeah.
And then there's the gorgeous lady hit squad that comes at John and his Shadow Wolf friend in one chapter.
Wait, what?
There was this one chapter where they're out at a bar together and he gets hit on and he's like, nah, I'm not about to get hit on.
That's right,
I'm fine tonight. And then it turns out they're all part of some deep state hit squad that tries to distract you with boobs or something.
Yeah, that was... God, I had forgotten about that. Yeah, it's
because that's a nothing chapter that doesn't fucking matter. It's not like it's revealed that those ladies were doing anything except trying to murder him. It's not even clear who sent them. There's not even any sort of resolution of that plot point.
I just want to read one. Can you read one line for me about Alicia's hair? Because it's a really weird, excessive detail that I just couldn't. I was just I don't understand. It's when she's cleaning her hair of burrs or something, and they had to write a whole 2 sentences about it, and I just thought it was really weird.
My guess, boss, is they were after the kid and John Goad, said Alicia, who was shaking her long black hair free of the debris she had picked up when she had circled through the cacti to come around behind the 4 bad guys she had capped.
It's just weird because we never get any personality. Yeah, we never get any other personality or details unless it's related to her hair or how good she can shoot a guy or whatever. I mean, at least this book's one mercy is we didn't have to read any sex scenes. They pet each other's thighs once and look at each other, and that's about it. And thank God, because thank my personal spirit wolf for saving me from that. I was glad that Alicia wasn't a damsel in distress, but then they just make John's mom the damsel in distress, right? So you can't even avoid that. And then all the other women are... I wouldn't even say they're paper dolls. They're just names on a page. The reporter is already dead before we even meet her.
Why does the reporter send John a sexy picture of herself? It says she sends a picture of herself to convince him to meet up with her. What do you mean?
That is a real 1920s through 1940s noir detective book move. Where before, the internet and reliable phone calls, you would leave. Sometimes I'm sure somebody could leave a photo of themselves or something. It's still weird, but it's extra weird in 2017, right? It's
right. She did not have to send a picture of herself.
Yeah, it's very strange.
So that's just a real general look through that, because we've got so much more to get through, and I'm sure you'll get the flavor of these characters as we move into the next section. But let's score plot construction finally, Paris. It's been an hour.
Yeah, let's give that a good old -1. Good old negative
solid -1.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move into prose and dialogue.
All right, prose. So the best way I can describe this is it's like reading the worst script of like a Walker, Texas Ranger or SVU episode from the 90s. And actually, wait a second. SVU is a Dick Wolf show. He's a shadow wolf too, Chris. We've uncovered the conspiracy.
That's how he knows how to write. He just knows. His gut gives him the scripts.
Oh my God. And the book even opens on page 1, the credits from that documentary roll. And it's like the opening.
Native Americans have an innate and powerful spiritual connection with the earth and its creatures, an understanding of the true nature of all that is on this planet and how it works in the perfect balance of cause and effect. An elite group within the Native American communities, known as shadow wolves, are part of this perfect balance and are the best of the best, with the ability to see what can't be seen with the eyes. They know without having to be taught. They blend easily with the night. True right from wrong is ingrained in their souls, which makes them able to stand against evil no matter the cost. To see footprints on rocks.
Doink, doink.
It's basically SVU, is what I'm saying.
But that's like
it's
a really
border
lengthy one. Like, I
SVU.
imagine like they're doing that in the vocal booth. I'm like, I think we could cut that down. That's like a solid minute before the episode even
now
starts.
I'm really curious to know if that's verbatim from the real documentary or if that was, because that's cringe. That's kind of cringy. I mean, saying that they know true right from wrong, yikes. That's a claim. That's a claim right there.
They can see footprints on rocks.
Yeah.
That's also brought up a couple times in the book. Is like, what do you mean?
Yeah. Anyway, so it's, again, I gave it a 0 for technical construction because I was like, it is a book. It's not good, but you can read the sentences and you can understand what is happening at any given point, which is a baseline requirement. But there's a lot of stuff about the prose that's bad. Like, there's, like I was talking about that glossary at the end that actually just made me more confused. There's this term, Bubba, used throughout the book, and then the glossary, it defines Bubba, and I don't get a better understanding of what a Bubba is. I am more confused about what a fucking Bubba is, Chris. What is it?
It keeps bringing up 34th degree Bubbas.
What the fuck is that?
34th degree is some Freemason shit, is what I found by Googling.
Oh, Morris is a Mason,
of,
so that must have been him. I don't know if Seagal is.
Yeah,
too, but...
so like that's like wrapped up in the conspiracy angle, I think, because it's all the deep state conspirators that are described as 34th degree Bubbas.
Wait, really? I guess I just remembered that. Okay.
Yes, it's all that. So like the fact that Morrissey is a Freemason kind of confuses things a little bit.
Yeah.
So I tried to do some Googling about like Freemasons and Bubbas, and I found a little bit of information that seems to suggest there's like some stories about a guy named Bubba who is a Freemason of some kind. Perhaps he's like the, folktale Freemason. I couldn't determine if he was real or not. So I'm equally confused as to what they're talking about. My best guess is that this is some kind of boomerism about like guy who is intimidating and big or perhaps connected or something like that. I can't tell if it's like a physical descriptor or like a status descriptor. It's one of those things where it's like, I feel like I don't speak the same language as
I felt that way too.
Who the author assumes is reading this book.
And similarly, like, so you got the Bubba thing, you got the weird quotation thing I talked about earlier. And it just, while the sentences certainly are sentences that conform to, English grammatical rules, they're just devoid of any personality, right? Like, these sentences could be picked from any book, perhaps, except for the true gems, of which we'll read from a list later.
I think we should just start getting into reading passages, because there's really no way to deliver this idea to you aside from just reading bits out loud.
Yeah. All right. Chris, do you want to, I guess you can get started here. You got a lot of, we've both read a lot, but I guess today's a reading heavy day.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I'm going to start reading from a section that's like one of my favorite fight scenes in the book. It is between John Goad and Godet or whatever. Yeah. John Good. I'm just going to say John Good.
John Good.
And Special Agent Wilson. This is like even before Wilson is revealed as like deep state agent. It's just like Wilson coming in and being like, give me those prisoners back, motherfucker. You'll see the context in a second.
Before you begin, just a warning, the R slur appears here, just so you know.
Yes. Okay. Chapter 15, The Enemy Within. Meanwhile, John Good had convened a Shadow Wolf only lunch meeting at
so
Sonny's
funny?
Restaurant on the reservation.
That just killed me. The Shadow Wolf
only lunch.
We're just going to have some sandwiches.
Noche, Chico, and Kino were gathered around a table with him. Kino never appears again, by the way.
There's so many characters. Yeah, there's so many characters that are just names and they don't matter. Again, just tighten your writing so that we're only spending time with the characters that matter. And if you are going to add people, give them a little zazz. Poor Kino. We never knew ye.
All right, back to the Shadow Wolf only lunch. John had spoken with Armando Grant a half hour earlier and had been alerted by him that CSS Special Agent Wilson was on his way there to ask him some questions about the shootout the night before. He had no sooner ended the call when Wilson and two other men in suits came through the door just as the group's food was brought to the table. Wilson walked up to John and glared at him. You want to explain to me how you got one of my prisoners killed last night? John looked up at the red-faced federal agent and replied with a simple, no. What the fuck kind of answer is that? Maybe that nonsense flies with the we work with, but it goes nowhere with us. You started explaining, and you better tell me something that means something to me about this mess you caused. Or, John asked casually as he sat perfectly relaxed, or, Wilson looked like he was about to come out of his skin. Or I'll lock your ass up. You got that, Geronimo? Also a slur. You won't see the light of day again until I say you do. He leaned menacingly into John's face. Let me tell you something, oh great white father. If you don't stop disrespecting the name of a fierce warrior chief and start acting like you believe that me and my friends here are actually human beings, I'm gonna go Billy Jack on your ass. John took a slow bite of his sandwich as he stared back at the furious CSS special agent. Billy Jack was a fictional character who kicked dumb shits, like you, in the nuts. He did that a lot in the movies. I suppose that's a threat, Geronimo? You got me crapping in my pants. Can't you see me shaking and shitting? He looked at his fellow agents who were laughing loudly until John started shitting and farting and crying.
Sorry, that's so good. I'm so sorry. I forgot about that line. That line made me laugh out loud when I read it too. Whew, all right, go ahead.
He was several inches taller than Wilson, who was by now looking up at him. I'll tell you what I'm going to do, just like Billy Jack did in the movie when he was dealing with his asshole antagonists. John went tiger face, a martial arts method of draining all expression from one's face.
I don't think that's real. I don't think tiger face is real.
I'm going to take this foot here, he pointed at his left foot, and I'm going to place it right there, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. He pointed at Wilson's right temple. Then we can all watch you shit your pants for real.
You know what's funny about that? You know what's funny about this inclusion? Is that there is a story that has gone around Hollywood for years about a period where Seagal was working on a movie, and if you read anything about Mr. Seagal here, you'll know that almost everyone who has ever worked with him fucking hates him, dislikes him, doesn't want to work with him again. It's a consistent pattern. I mean, in addition to all the sexual assault allegations, of which there are so many. Again, feel free to read about them on your own. But there's a story involving Jean LaBelle, who is a famous stuntman trained in many martial arts. They were working on Out for Justice together. And I guess they got into a disagreement because LaBelle accused Seagal of, I'm going to keep saying Seagal, of mistreating some of the other stunt performers. And so, Seagal's being an asshole and is like, "Oh, I'm so cool, like I'm immune. You can't choke me unconscious." And LaBelle goes, "Oh yeah?" and he chokes them unconscious, and Seagal supposedly shat himself. And
there you go. Maybe
both,
he's like putting that in there as we're like, I'm not the one that shits and farts and cries.
Yeah, so it strikes me as funny because I'm like, didn't this happen? Like, I don't know. I mean, then people were like asked about it later, and LaBelle said that they did have an altercation, but it's been hard to get confirmation on the shitting of his pants, and it's so not completely sure, but anyway, it's just funny. So it's like a fun Hollywood story. More hearsay, okay. I guess. I for purposes of legal stuff, an alleged story that I cannot confirm, but a fun one. Mm-hmm. Continue.
Okay, so we're gonna stop that reading right there because that's plenty, and there is a line that comes up later in that scene that we will read later in another collection of lines. But Paris, why don't you take the next reading?
Okay, a surprise for me.
John's group continued moving slowly toward the cave, and when they were less than 2 miles out, they stopped and gathered in a circle, again discussing the approach. John said, "Remember the snake clusters around this part of the desert. You know how pissed off a snake can get if you interrupt their gens. Step carefully, especially near that cave.
Watch out for the snake fucking
during mating season."
Yeah,
I don't know.
True? Look, a quick Google.
During mating season, hundreds of rattlers gathered in certain parts of the desert, in the most remote places, to mate. Where they were headed was one of those places.
You really could have combined those two sentences. Like, oh god.
The group did a quiet prayer chant and short war dance in place, quietly chanting. It made for quote-unquote strong hearts as they went into battle.
They're trying to sneak up on a cave and they're all just like,
God.
Everyone work. Let's go 1, 2, 3.
A very quiet war dance. Very quietly. And also, this is just one of those like, oh, I guess we're Native Americans, therefore we're gonna live through every fucking stereotype we've ever seen in a anyway.
Use the knives first, if you can. Silent guns second. Alicia, you have the baton? John looked at her for an answer.
Fuck, I do an Alicia voice. What's an Alicia voice?
Always have my baton. You know that better than anyone.
The Lady Seagal voice is pretty good, actually.
He knew how deadly she was with those 16 inches of metal. So light, so fast,
so deadly. There's ellipses between all of those, so I had to get extra husky.
They checked their weapons one more time and went back to their vehicles. When they reached a point that was less than a mile from the cave, they left the vehicles and fanned out across the desert floor. They blended into the desert night. Their feet made no sound as they lifted their bodies by lifting their energy upward.
Okay, sure.
Okay. All part of what made the Shadow Wolves so deadly. You know what? That's a sentence fragment. That sucks.
Their stealth ability was much like that of the ninja.
Oh, God, ninja? We're really doing the ninja thing? Oh, jeez.
No one ever sees them coming, but most know when they've been there and gone. Half the team went to the right of the cave, and John's team went to the left. The Marshal, Gato, and Jimmy Begay remained back with the vehicles at John's request because of the need for surprise, and they had no experience with being as silent and approaching a target as was necessary. They secreted themselves in the brush a short way from the vehicles and waited for a word from someone in the raid party. John drew to within 200 feet of the entrance to the cave. He was twice as close as the others in the teams. Alicia started creeping toward John's position with her MAC-10 slung across her back and her Sig Sauer, with silencer, nestled in her right hand. "Wait," he said, cautioning her. "I see 2 of them, and they look like they're guarding the entrance in prone positions on both sides, and I'm surprised they haven't seen us." He looked through his night vision binoculars. "Me too."
They both dropped to one knee, as John said.
"I smell a rat here."
He looked around.
"What do you mean?"
Alicia asked quietly.
"I think that there's a good chance they have night goggles, and that would make us very easy to see at this range."
He thought for a moment.
"They could have booby traps all around this area, and they might be expecting an interloper to step on one of them. Maybe that's what they're hoping will happen." What do we do with that? She whispered. Give me a minute.
He stared into his night vision equipment. John whispered into his headset mic.
Noche, bring your ass and 2 of the pack with you toward me. We're about 200 feet from the cave entrance, and at 1 o'clock as you approach. And stay really low. They could be using night vision.
But he doesn't tell him that there could be booby traps, which is hilarious to me.
Oh, yeah, wait, by the way.
Noche responded immediately.
What would make you think different?
Not certain of that. We're waiting for you. He turned to Alicia and asked in a whisper,
Can you see anybody in the cave?
Yeah, I'm looking at 3 men, and they're moving stuff around. Looks like large wooden boxes.
Any sign of my mother? No.
A few minutes later, Noche and 2 of the shadow wolves crept up on them like ghosts in the night. How do we take them? He asked quietly. John pointed in the direction of the cave.
There are 2 guards lying on the ground on either side of the entrance, and we need to get them from behind.
But I'm thinking that these assholes might have planted a booby trap near them in the cave. The tall lawman was running a strategy through his head and was interrupted by a suggestion from Noche.
Jerry here almost got himself bit by a rattler he damn near stepped on.
He threw his hat on the son of a bitch and grabbed it before it could strike. It's in his backpack, all pissed off and ready to do some harm to the next thing it sees. Shouldn't you maintain control of a deadly snake by holding onto its neck and pinching its jaw? Throwing it in a backpack and then opening that
and hope the
backpack
snake
sounds
goes
like
in
the
the direction
worst
that
idea.
I think it will.
Yeah. What the fuck? Noche looked approvingly in the direction of the young man. So we talked about it and decided we might make it a present to those who grabbed your mother. John said quickly,
I got an even better idea. Let's drop in on one of those boys who are lying on the ground pulling guard duty.
How do we do that, John? Alicia questioned. How do we throw the snake? How do we drop the snake on them? Jesus Christ.
Noche and the 2 young wolves can take it in a wide circle to the right and come in behind the mound above the cave. We'll do the same to the left. When we get set in place, he'll drop the snake on the one who is below them, and that should set off all kinds of pandemonium.
This felt right to John.
Might even drive the guys in the cave to come running around when they hear him screaming, and scream he will.
Jerry was enjoying this. He was Navajo and had the tribal sense of humor. What the fuck does that mean, first of all?
That's exactly what I'm thinking.
Godet smiled, knowing he was about to do something that could make for a lifetime memory. They set out, moving cautiously and as silent as the snake they were carrying. Even though it's a rattler who is pissed off. Wouldn't that be a liability as you're trying to sneak up fucking in the silent desert night and you got a rattler in the backpack fucking... Okay. One of the men who were inside the cave came out and his voice carried through the desert air as he asked, Everything good out here? John recognized it immediately as the voice of the man he had talked with on the phone about his mother. Yeah, nothing moving. I like it like that. He laughed. John thought,
I'm gonna like watching you while I shove this snake down your throat.
Yeah, end on that
handle
extremely
right now.
Seagal line right there.
74 for just boring ass writing. Like, let's just get some flavor in here for like how most of the book sounds when they're not.
It's the beginning of the deep state shootout chapter, I believe, where we get some riveting car exiting.
Yes. Yeah, so this is how most of the book sounds when you're not in a fight.
Chapter 13, Deep State Shootout. John turned the engine of his vehicle off and stretched and yawned before exiting it. He walked slowly through the pitch darkness of the desert night to the door of his home. He checked his surroundings visually, and then stood in silence, listening to the rhythm of the night expressed by the desert creatures that lived mostly hidden all around him. He pulled his keys from his pocket and instinctually placed the house key in the lock without looking.
Riveting writing.
Cool
Absolutely
guy
riveting.
shit. I can put my key in the door without even thinking about it. I don't have to think at all. I can stone face empty void mind, putting my key in the lock.
And it's just like, he goes in and, he hears a noise, but it's just Alicia being sexy on the bed. Oh, baby. Hello. I missed you. Yeah. My another favorite section is a few pages later, actually during the Deep State shootout, where, I almost said Seagal. It's Seagal, Alicia, because ostensibly it's John, Alicia, and a few other people. And again, these are all even though they're in SUVs and they have weapons, they are plain clothes. They are not wearing vests. They do not have tactical gear. They do not have shields, helmets, nothing like that. Somehow they face off against 8 SWAT team guys in full SWAT regalia. So we're talking like shields, helmets, vests, tactical outfit, and somehow they win. They kill every last SWAT team guy and none of them get injured. It's just incredible.
All right. They rolled out of the sheriff's compound and headed towards the reservation. A black SUV pulled out a short way behind them and began following. Alicia sat sideways in her seat, looking back at the road. Make a quick right on the next street. He wheeled right, then gunned the engine, racing down the empty street. What do you see? He asked. I thought we had company, but maybe I was right. I gotta work on my Alicia voice here. I'm just doing Seagal
I mean,
twice.
I had a hard time trying to do 3 different Seagals, but I pulled it off.
Okay, I'm gonna try to change that a little bit. I thought we had company, but maybe I was wrong. John made a left and another left at the next corner. Before long, he was back on the street to the reservation. They entered Indian land some 10 minutes later and drove toward the task force HQ, but were suddenly aware of 2 SUVs now moving up on them, rapidly firing shots that took out the rear window. Alicia yelled to Jamie, "Stay down!" She opened up with her M4, firing through the now vacant rear window and took out the windshield on the lead vehicle following them. She strafed again and took out the headlights on both sides. A loud thud and uncontrollable swerving told John they had lost a rear tire. He turned the vehicle suddenly and it screeched to a halt sideways on the empty road. John opened the rear door and dragged Jamie out and put him on the ground, warning him to stay there as 5 rounds aimed at them whizzed through the night. The big man went to the front end of the vehicle, and Alicia took the rear as they opened up on the 8 SWAT-clad individuals who were firing back. 2 of them ran along a ditch towards John's position, firing furiously. He lit them both up and then just shook his head, wondering why they pulled such a dumb move. It wasn't long before his question was answered. 4 others rushed Alicia's position, pouring round after round as they did. Alicia wasn't there, though, as they soon found out when she appeared out of the darkness behind them and took all 4 out with strafing headshots. There were now 2 left to deal with, but they chose to disengage and head back out the way they came. John fired at the retreating vehicle, not knowing if he hit anyone or even landed a round on the SUV. So just, a little taste
Such
of
man,
how
so
everyone
bullet.
is so cool and can do all the cool guy shit all the time, especially cool lady, I guess, at this point.
Yeah. The lawman count is real high in this book. I just want to talk about the lawman count. So in a lot of bad books that we've read, there's always words or phrases that the authors cling to and sort of forget, I don't know, to go back and find and replace, or just don't care enough. There's just no creativity, no deep description. And in this book, it is the phrase lawman, tall lawman, or big lawman.
Chris, come on down, big and tall lawman suit come for you. If you're a lawman looking for a suit, come on down. We got the big and tall, no short lawmans allowed.
No. I mean, and this is a product of Seagal, Morrissey, and by extension Arpaio here, all believing that law enforcement is this sort of apex of American masculinity, right? And also that tallness is directly proportional to someone's value and skill, which is batshit, and obviously neither of these things are true, but this is the sort of ideals we're trafficking in here. Chris, can I get the lawman counts, please? Can I get those counts?
Generic lawman, just mentioning lawman in this book, is 56 times in 221 pages, giving us roughly like a 0.25 rate of lawman per page, which, I mean, seems like a little low, but like that's kind of a lot.
It's always describing, I keep almost saying Seagal, it's always describing John, the main character. So yes. I think that's a pretty fucking high count.
You gotta have some other ways to talk about him.
Once every 4 pages, we're talking about John as Lawman John. All right, what are our other lawman counts?
33 of those 56 are big lawman. So he's bigly lawman at large. Big and tall at large lawman.
That's insane. That's
the
just
tall
ridiculous.
lawman is a chaste 5. So, we're a little bit more reserved with that one. It's also used, like, we see Native American lawman used twice, so that's sort of reasonable. And then there's the Apache lawman thing as well, used once. And then everything else is just the lawman. So the remainder.
But there's a lot of weird obsession with tallness anyway. So there's the 5 tall lawmans, but then there's another 11 tall moments, most of which are about men needing to be tall enough, or how tall John is, or how tall women are. It's like tallness is this weird fixation in this book, which again I think is representative of this strange view of the world that these people have, which is just fucking bizarre. It's not like you can control how fucking tall you are. I don't know if I need to like put a finer point on this, but it's so stupid.
Okay. That is a good amount of readings for just prose, and I think we can continue reading sections that have a little bit more dialogue in them for that kind of flavor.
So now we're gonna talk about dialogue. Chris, I would classify this as, on a scale from natural to cliched and stilted to alien, as cliched and stilted and sometimes alien. It's definitely on the further right end of the spectrum. Haha. Yeah. So let's just go ahead.
This is just bad action movie shit all around here.
And I like I just rewatched Demolition Man the other day, and honestly, fucking great action movie. You know, that movie even gives a big thumbs up to like consent, which was a fun thing for me to discover, because I had like started reading this book and I hadn't seen Demolition Man in years, and so we were sitting down to watch it and I was like, oh god, is this movie going to be ruined for me? And I was like, nope, movie stands up. It's great. It's great.
For once. Okay, I'm going to read a section that's directly after that SWAT team clad group encounter. This is when their boss shows up on scene after.
Okay.
Who killed who? Armando asked, pointing at the SWAT-clad bodies. I got these 2. John nodded at the 2 bodies to his right. I got these 4. Alicia pointed. She's just Wolverine at this point. I can't fucking do the voice.
That's okay. Alicia can be Wolverine. That's
okay,
fine.
fine.
There's no rules.
I got these 4, bub. Alicia pointed proudly to the rest. Impressive, outnumbered, and from the look of it, obviously outgunned. And yet you're still standing and they ain't. Why am I not surprised? He looked again at the bodies. And relieved, he added quickly. Yeah, we surrounded them, bub. Alicia gave a tight-lipped smile and looked at her boss with a bit of coyness showing through in her demeanor, waiting for his response. So, 2 of you surrounded 6 of them. You gotta tell me how you did that. That's a secret technique taught to me by a great internal martial arts teacher. John was stone-faced as he spoke. You haven't told me how it works, Armando was curious, and I'm not going to. Why? Big secret in China. Only shown to Chinese and Native Americans. Bound to silence, boss.
Christ.
What do you mean only to Chinese? Like, why are the Native Americans included in the ancient Chinese secret?
Well, because these are 2 groups that Seagal has, tried to pretend to be or be closely allied with in his life. So, this is all internal Seagal headcanon.
Internal martial arts Seagal teachings.
Yeah. I mean, that and internal that just refers to stuff like Bagua, which they reference a few times, and other stuff that requires, sort of mental conditioning as well as physical. So it sounds a little silly, but that's all they're talking about.
Okay, I'll pause that reading there then, because I feel like that's enough. That line about only shown to Chinese and Native Americans was just a real head scratcher for me.
Well, I think though that it's actually tongue in cheek, because John looked over at Alicia, who was eating this up, is the next line, and so I think he's just being silly, but it's hard to tell, and
right?
Because the writing is not great, right? Oh boy, and now we can just get into the anti-Muslim and Arabic racism in this book.
Buckle up, everybody.
Oh, geez. They're buckled. They didn't go anywhere. So possibly the lines that made me just recoil into my body are in this section where John is confronting some of the terrorists, specifically this guy called Kotzi, and Chris, I don't know who wants to have their voice forever imprinted with these
I feel like I've had enough bad voice things to happen to me recently.
Yeah, I guess I'll have to
you
take
should
these for the team.
Take this one for the team. Yes, please.
All right. Again, I am reading this from the text to demonstrate how terrible it is. This is not us reading this because we agree with this. Just gonna get that out, obviously, but just in case. So he is confronting this guy in the cave to try to save his mom, right? Because they've kidnapped his mother. He moved silently into the cave, looking left and right for his mother. When she did come into view, she was being held upright by Kazi Kamir, his handgun pressed against her head. So, Geronimo, we finally meet. He regarded John with caution, focusing intently on him. He felt that because he held the big lawman's mother, the reaction from him would be foolish and emotion-filled, and if he could turn that into a kill, it would leave the rest of them confused and easy targets. He had been well-trained and felt he could easily escape into the night.
You have no way out, so why don't you make things easy on yourself and let her go?
John said cautiously. No, that's not going to happen, he replied confidently.
Then I guess some more are gonna die here this night.
John moved a bit closer as he spoke.
And I prepared something for you in that eventuality.
Really? What's that? Kazi maintained his grip on Gode, whatever, and kept that gun to her head. He was standing so close to her that none of them could chance a shot. Kazi backed up a few feet farther into the darkness.
What have you prepared for me, and now your mother, as we leave this troubled world? I dipped my rounds in pig's blood and also my knife. Nothing personal, just making things interesting. You understand, don't you?
Oh, God! And then a little while later, at a page later, as they're getting into the actual fight, his mother calls out,
John, the old ways, remember them!
She was terrified for her
Use
son,
the
so was
force.
Alicia, because she was witnessing the first time John was facing another person who appeared to be as good as he was. Kazi swiped again, and this time he cut into John's jacket. His confidence grew as he proceeded. Don't worry, Mother Gode. I'll make certain that you follow your son into eternity. You'll be right with him, he said tauntingly, while engaging John with 2 more rapid swipes.
Pig's blood, asshole!
John whispered as he moved around about 45 degrees to the right side of Kazi. Those words distracted the Persian enough to give John the opening he needed to move in and strike, drawing blood from the top of Kazi's hand when he tried to evade the whirling pattern of the lawman's blade. Kazi looked down at the huddled body of John's mother lying on the ground a few feet away and threw a jolting kick that landed a glancing blow on her upper arm, just missing her shoulder. He had hoped that move would infuriate John so he would do something stupid and fall prey to his knife. It almost worked, as John lunged for him. Losing his footing, he fell forward just under Kazi's stabbing move. Kazi dove on top of the fallen lawman, his blade coming down on John's throat. John rolled to the side, flipping the Persian and exposing Kazi to another cut, this time on his left arm.
How's that pig blood feel, asshole? Is it starting to course through your veins? Maybe even pissing off the prophet?
John said in a hoarse whisper. I just feel like if you are a spiritual man who is at one with things and knows, supposedly inherently knows right from wrong, wow, does that not square with that idea of the character? Whew, fucked up.
Yeah, that's some.
This is our
truly
hero,
horrendous
guys. This is our hero. This is not like, oh, the villain's so evil. No, this is a great tactic. Also, it's just kind of like a weird, simplistic view of people who are Muslim, right? Because I don't think they would care. I don't think someone who has agreed to die for their religion would give a fuck if you had a little pig's blood on your knife.
All right, why don't we wash the taste of that out of our mouth with a little bit of stilted, sexy dialogue here.
Oh yeah, there you go.
All right, so this is John coming into the house. Actually, this is right after the whole he got out of the car and put his keys in the lock without looking because he's so fucking cool.
So cool.
He walked into his bedroom and was stunned for the moment at the sight of Alicia lying across his bed with one of his shirts on, and that was about it. Hey, did I scare you, little boy? She threw her head back, releasing her long black hair, and gave a sultry laugh.
No, you gotta read that as Wolverine.
I was trying to. That was my Wolverine voice.
Sorry.
He waved him to her is the next line What? I forgot. I'm going to read this whole section again, hitting the Wolverine voice a little bit harder.
Okay.
Hey, did I scare you, little boy, bub? She threw her head back, releasing her long black hair, and gave a sultry laugh as she devoured him with her eyes. She waved him to her. Hey, baby. Nice surprise. Almost got you killed, though. He smiled as he moved to her and sat down on the bed, slowly kicking off his boots. How did you get in? Did you forget the key you leave in the hole under the porch railing? She kissed his cheek. I did, bub. I have trained attack scorpions there, he laughed. You didn't train them well enough, Johnny boy, she commented smugly but in a cute way. She was his lady and a tribal police officer who was also attached to the task force. She had been away on another assignment. The ringing of his phone broke the moment. John, you need to get back to the jail and pull your guy out right now. It was Nero Agave, a jail deputy who was a brother Shadow Wolf. He saw someone in population who had him freaked out, and he is begging me to get you to get him out of here. I'm confused. How could he know that you know me? I don't think he does. I just happened to be walking him to a cell when he saw someone who made him piss his pants, Nero responded. On my way. Can you pull him into the medical unit until I get there? John sensed danger and opportunity at the same time. He told Alicia what was going on, and she wanted to go with him to make the pickup. John agreed to that, and they were in his vehicle heading to the Maricopa County Jail within 5 minutes. John drove as Alicia put her gear in order. He explained the deal with Jamie to her as they rode. She took it all in and immediately started processing it in her mind. She had a knack for cutting through the minutiae on her way to the underlying facts. What do you have for weaponry, woman? John asked, nodding toward Alicia's black canvas bag that she had placed on the floor in front of her before she jumped in the front seat next to him. I'm Mama Grizzly Bear ready, my love, bub, she assured him. I would prefer Mama Grizzly Bear ass ready, but for now we'll go with what you got. He smiled, knowing his lady was more than just a lady. Okay.
Woo, that was pretty good. I would like to read the Seagal movie name insert line. It actually happens, I think, 3 times, but
It
I'm
does.
just gonna read the first time.
Let's just do the best one.
Yeah, this is actually just a page after where you or page or so after where you stopped. He dialed on his phone, and when Armando Grant answered, he explained what had just happened and asked permission to take Jamie out of that jail. Where will you put him, John? Armando sounded concerned. Not sure, but we gotta get him going from here, he assured his boss. Okay, then take him, but keep me in the loop on every bit of this, understood? Sure, of course I understand. I'm going to play this by ear. He had turned away from the group as he continued the conversation. I think we got something really big here, Armando, and we need to take it all the way. All the way to where? I don't know, John lied. Whatever it is now, looks to me to be only the tip. Of the iceberg? The task force commander queried. No, of the spear. It's the tip of the spear, boss. And I have a strong feeling that I'm right. So, The Tip of the Spear is the movie that's been in production, quote unquote, forever. That is just this book. So I think he's just like gotta, I don't know.
He just has to put
gotta
the movie
set it up
because he thinks it's cool. Okay, I think that's enough reading material for now. It's so funny to me how like tightly packed all those ones are to each other. It was like one page separated, but like I feel it was good to pass things back and forth. So dialogue and prose, Paris. Solid negative one,
yeah,
man.
that's a negative one. Yeah, that's a negative one.
Okay. So let's move into Terriblo's presence, Paris.
Oh, Terriblo is fucking
Oh my
here.
God. Finally, he showed up in a big way. He was on vacation
Tentacles
for
got
such
me
a
around the
long
neck.
time. And here he is.
Yeah.
You have a note here that the Joe Arpaio cameo alone is enough to give this a 1 with the spirit of a 3, which I can agree with.
Yeah.
Because
if
Joe's
you
not
got
just
Joe
in the
Arpaio-
forward. He's also like in the book for a second.
No, I think he's supposed to be Armando Grant.
Yeah.
I think he's I mean, and again, just want to remind you, Joe Arpaio. Just read that Wikipedia. I don't want to waste too much time again because so many shows and stuff have talked about these two. But wow, if that guy's right in the forward to your book, you have already lost. That is just a wild inclusion.
Okay, and I'm just going to hit Terriblo's presence with 5 of my favorite lines in the book here. Just like these are the ones that when I read them, I went like, what do you mean is happening here? Okay, so I'm going to read them in the order of, like, to me, the least silliest to the most, which is not the order I have them in the notes.
Got it.
Okay, the first one. We are Native Americans. We sit on Mother Earth always for anything we need. Like, that just really smacks of, like, no, what do you mean?
We sit on Mother Earth always for anything we need. Okay, it's a weird way to put that.
John made a Marlon Brando Godfather face as he spoke. Like, what? What is this supposed to mean?
Because Seagal, and therefore his self-insert John, has to be a great actor, so he can just do Marlon Brando faces, didn't you know?
I guess. I guess that's like... But what effect does that have in the moment?
Very stupid. It's a very stupid line.
The other two CSS agents started for John, but at least he hit one with a wrist strike, parentheses, monkey wrist. That snapped his head back. What does the addition of monkey wrist tell me? Like, it's like, it's an aside where you're like, in case you were wondering what kind of wrist strike, it was the monkey wrist. What's the monkey wrist? Fuck if I know. Coming in at number 2, John was pulling all of this apart and putting the pieces back together in his mind, as was his custom. Do you mean fucking thinking, bro? Like, isn't that just what my custom is, to think about things? But apparently it's not, as we have said. This is the one time that he's allowed to have non-empty void. And then my favorite line in the book, Paris. I hear he and his amigos can disappear. I hear he can take people's hats off with his feet. That's what I know. I'm bad. What do you mean? He can take people's hats off. That's supposed to be intimidating? Does he just mean they can do a really high kick?
Yes. The suggestion is that he can probably roundhouse kick above your head. And also with
really
precision enough.
Scary or something.
Yeah, yes, if you can kick that high with that level of precision, that is very cool, but you've written it in a way that makes it dumb. Like, congratulations, you ruined something.
I'm
that
more
could have been
pictured
cool.
like, he was just sitting down and he just like uses his toe to like grab the brim of a hat and take it off, and people are like,
exactly.
oh fuck, oh shit, run away. His hat's off with his toes.
Exactly, because it is so poorly written. It undermines its own ideas, and that's a great, just a great microcosm of this book's terribleness.
Okay, Terriblo's presence, -1.
Oh boy,
strong.
Yeah, that's a whew.
The good smell of Terriblo in here.
Spirit of a -3. Whew.
Yeah. Okay, so we can finally move into should this exist. And Paris, if you want to go through the questions we normally do, we can, but I feel like I could just say outright -1.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Would readers of this genre enjoy this? I don't know if this genre is like airport action book or right-wing conspiracy. I'm not really sure. I'm sure if you're like a hard-pilled right-wing person, you'd love this because you want to worship Joe Arpaio and Steven Seagal. But I think if you're just looking for an action book, I don't think people would think this is very good.
It's not even that good for
not
action.
very good.
The action scenes aren't really that exciting. Do we feel as if the author's goal was met? I don't know, convincing people that there's a deep state conspiracy because one Native American big lawman decided his gut was telling him the right thing, but it's fiction, so I don't know. No?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm not sure what the goal was.
If it's to write like conspiracy theory shit, then sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what to say about that one. I feel like they think they met their goal. I don't.
Yes.
Does it add anything new, interesting, or novel? No.
It's just a regurgitated fucking forum post. Like that's
the same. It's the same. We've actually read this book before, which I'm going to talk about briefly in a little bit. Did it take something from us? Oh,
yes.
Yeah, my time. Man, it took me. This was only 221 pages, and I had to take a break after every 10, 20 pages. I was having such a hard time getting through this in time. I was like, oh, I got like a week. I got plenty of time. Oh my God, this was so painful. I even had a hard time skimming because I didn't want to miss all the stupid shit. So it was like I felt like I couldn't engage Skim Protocol hard enough at the speed I wanted. Yeah, it was a painful one to read. and then all the racism in it was hard too,
That
and
was
just
difficult. Should this exist? -1.
no, it should not exist.
Okay,
No.
so Paris, we gave technical construction a 0, our 1 kindness. Plot construction, -1. Prose and dialogue, -1. Terriblo's presence, -1. Should this exist, -1. A -4 for Way of the Shadow Wolves. We were being nice. Okay, can we fix it? And Paris, fucking so I'm not even gonna go into it.
I think it could be fixed. I mean, the thing. So I just said a couple minutes ago, like, we've read this book before. We read Flashback, which I think was just a more competent version of, like, if you want to talk about how Barack Obama is evil and, like, rail on the left. Again, not a great book, but it was better written than this, and it had a little bit more going for it than, like, your typical right-wing stereotype fiction boxes being checked off. I mean, it had that, but it had a little more. I'm being very generous here. But, the Way of the Shadow Wolves it's an unnecessary contribution to the world of written words. This just did not need to exist. There's plenty of other right-wing conspiracy fiction out there. Why do we need to do this again? And why do we need to platform fucking Joe Arpaio, right? And, like, Seagal. I actually think this was Vanity published. Let me double check on that real quick. But I don't think this was published by a major publisher. Fifth Palace Publishing. Wow, why is this ranked 1,690 in Witch and Wizard Mysteries on Amazon? Also, 532 in Native American literature. That is too high. That is too high of a rating.
That hurts a lot. That's painful.
God.
Boy, we gotta really platform some better people.
Jesus Christ. Fifth Palace Publishing is just a vanity name. It's a Tom Morrissey vanity label. It's not a real publishing house. Okay.
Mystery solved.
Fine. Yeah, mystery solved. But I just don't feel like we need more of this. And honestly, even if I was like, yeah, I love right-wing conspiracy, like, this isn't the book I'd want as my champion. This isn't the book I'd send into the ring, right? Like, so even if this is your flavor of book, I still think this is the worst subset of that flavor. It just did not need to exist. All right, well, I've alluded to some things and said a few little errant facts, as well as I have been able to understand them from some allegations I've read. I feel like we can have a short digression into Seagal. I would like to read the "Did you know?" section from his IMDb, followed by some selections from his Wikipedia, along with Joe Arpaio's, because now that we've gotten through the book, I think you just need a little bit extra. The top quote from Steven Seagal and his IMDb is, "I am hoping that I can be known as a great writer and actor someday, rather than a sex symbol."
I think you're fine, Steve.
Yep.
I think you'll be fine.
Yep. His trademarks on IMDb, I don't know where these come from, by the way, but this is a brilliant list. Trademarks: 1, ponytail. 2, in all of his films, he is seen holding a Colt M1911A1 semi-automatic pistol. He owns several in his private collection. 3, uses Aikido in fight scenes. 4, quiet, husky voice. 5, corrugated eyes.
Huh? What? The lids are folded? What do you mean?
I don't know.
They're well supported
6,
by a folding mechanism within the lids.
yes, they can hold anything you put in them.
Does he
I
need
guess
squinting because he squints.
Maybe that's what it means. 6, towering height. He is quite tall. He's like 6'4" or something. Hulking frame. Aquiline features.
I don't know what that means. So.
His films usually have 3 words in the title. What?
Take a shit.
Usually
starring Steven Seagal.
Usually plays former government agents or military personnel. often plays characters named John, Jack, or Jake, most notably John Alexander. Physically dominates opponents in all his fight scenes, rarely, if ever, being hit himself. True. His films often reflect his conservative political views and interest in environmentalism. Frequently works with directors Keone Waxman, Don E. Fauntleroy, and Michael Kush. Wears black clothing, hair slicked back. Great. Okay, now his nicknames, get ready. I don't know who calls Seagal any of these things, but his nicknames are The Great One.
Oh, okay, of course.
Lord Stephen.
Okay, I think maybe Stephen himself is adding these.
The Master of Aikido.
Okay, he's the master.
Yeah. Yep. So that's just a great little taste. And then I think since the Wikipedia is so long, I think I'm just going to read you some titles of sections. There is an entire section called Allegations and Lawsuits, and it has subsections. Early 1990s, 1995 lawsuit, 2010 lawsuit, 2011 lawsuit, 2017 allegations, 2018 allegations and investigation, 2020 federal securities violation settlement, victim of attempted extortion, conflicts with stuntmen. Oh boy.
The master of racking up lawsuits.
He makes a lot of claims about how his whole period as a law enforcement officer is also really weird and fishy. So he was deputized by a sheriff because he had come and tried to teach the officers some martial arts or something, and then he got deputized. And then the TV show happened, Steven Seagal Lawman, which was on A&E for a while. I fucking forgot about that. Yeah, and so he was then sworn in as a deputy sheriff. But it just seems like he's sort of got these appointments just by being a famous guy who was around, and they all sort of shared similar ideas. So it's not like he studied the law and was an actual cop. He sort of was just allowed to do these things largely for a TV show. Again, I'm not saying I know everything here, but from what I read, it just seems really suspicious.
Cool. Love to hear that.
Yeah. I didn't want to spend too much time on it, but just wanted people to understand what we're working with here with these folks.
Okay. Well, we've reached the end of this finally after 2 hours and 40 minutes of recording here, Paris. So thank you, Miles, for your contribution to this, because we really had to dig into this one.
Thank you to all the people who recommended this over the years. I think there was 7 of you that I wrote down, oh boy, they asked for Shadow Wolves again, so thanks.
And thank you to all of our patrons. Our bad bookworms, Anya, Ben, Donnie, Emily, Jakub, Jared, Horace, Renee, Scott, and Will. Our exacting editors, Kieran, David, D, Emmy, Funny Robot with Antennas, Greg, Harry 7, Martin, Root Beer Cutie, and the Ugly One. Our loathsome librarians, Veronica, Senia, Arant, Beast with the Least, Yanka, Luchek of the Void, the taco-eating unicorn of the Hot Springs, Patricia, Robin, and Austin, and our pesky publisher, Miles May, for recommending us this roller coaster ride of a book. And of course, our Ko-fi donors our ever-faithful Kiwi Thing and Martin F. and Brenna, who helped relieve us of some terrible books. If you want some terrible books we've read for the show, you can buy them over on our Ko-fi page. Will anyone accept the challenge to become an archivist this year? What heinous, monstrous tome will you force us to read? All right, Paris. I'm gonna sneak off into the darkness like a ninja. You won't see me ever as I'm rolling through the desert in my loud SUV filled with guns.
The other weird thing about this is that Aikido is a defensive martial art. It's not really a striking martial art. So it's weird that somebody who wants to be a big tough guy who hurts people is I do the rolling away and the avoiding. I mean, that's fine. I am all for it, but it is a weird juxtaposition there. Okay. Anyway.
I guess I'll Aikido myself out of this podcast. Well,
yep.
Hey.
Aikidoing away!
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Terrible Book Club. Terrible Book Club is an independent podcast produced by your hosts, Paris and Chris. Sound design and audio editing by Chris, with sound effects and music by Epidemic Sound and sometimes also Chris. Our theme song is Kiss by Yearn, which is, you guessed it, actually also Chris. You can find more of his soothing synthy sounds on Bandcamp at yearn.bandcamp.com. Do you want us to review a book of your choice on the show? Do you want access to some extra audio-visual weirdness? If so, become a patron at patreon.com/terriblebookclub. If you'd like to send us a one-time tip instead, you can do that at ko-fi.com/terriblebookclub. You can also support TBC for free by sharing the show on social media, following our accounts on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or Goodreads, telling your friends about your favorite episode, or by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, or anywhere else on the internet. To send us book recommendations or your adorable pet photos, send an email to terriblebookclub@gmail.com.